Okay, we are live. Good evening, everyone. John Gale here, and this is Hartford City Council's Planning, Economic Development, and Housing Committee meeting, regularly scheduled meeting for December 7th, 2022. And I am not the regular chair, but I am the acting chair this evening. Councilman James Sanchez, who is on the call with us, I believe, is the chair of the committee, but because his signal is potentially intermittent, he asked me to take over as chair this evening so that you all wouldn't get kicked off if he lost service. So I become the host here. So I have to read a couple of things here at the beginning. This meeting is being broadcast live on HPA-TV's Xfinity Government Channel 96 and Frontier Government Channel 6032. It's also going to be streamed via hpa-tv.org and the HPA-TV Facebook page and HPA-TV, Apple TV, Amazon TV, and Roku TV apps. It'll also be made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel and Vimeo channel for anybody who wants to check it out after the meeting. First, let me acknowledge council members and committee members that are present this evening. And I'm just going to say them as I see them on the screen here. We have Councilwoman Shirley Surgeon, who is a voting member, Councilwoman Marilyn Rossetti, a voting member, Councilman James Sanchez, as I mentioned already, Councilman Nick LeBron, who's a voting member. We have, I think that's it, unless I missed somebody.
I think Molly is on also. So her name is on the.
Oh, yes, and Council President is here. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Yep.
Appreciate it. We also have with us our Corporation Counsel, Howard Rifkin, and Assistant Corp Counsel, Jim Delvesco. And we have various other members, other folks on the screen, and I think we'll just leave it to introduce them as agenda items that are relevant to them come up. So tonight's agenda, we have 5 items on the agenda. And I guess I'm just going to take them in order. The very first item on the agenda is Mayor Bronin with an accompanying resolution authorizing the city to grant to the Connecticut Airport Authority clearance easements on land that is owned by the city near the Hartford Brainerd Airport. And this is a matter that's been on in this committee before. So I know we've had a lot of discussion about this. Councilwoman Surgeon.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you may want to mention to everyone to mute themselves.
Did everyone hear that? Very good advice from Councilwoman Surgeon. Please mute yourself if you're not talking. Okay, so back to the CAA easements. I know I've had some conversation with Councilman Sanchez about this. I don't know that there's anybody from CAA that's here tonight to discuss them. I don't know that there's anybody other than council members who are here to discuss them. So I guess my first question is there anybody other than a council member who's here with comment on the CAA on item 1 on our agenda tonight? Jack Hale, you're raising your hand?
Yes.
All right, well, the floor is yours, Jack. What is it that, what do we want to say?
Well, first off, my assumption had been that any action on this was going to be delayed until after the deep hearing next week. So I'm not sure what the plan is for this evening. That is the first real public hearing on that project. And my expectation is that's where we'll learn some things that have not been fully explicated thus far. And just to go back to what occurred at your committee's last meeting, I had tried to suggest that this was a development project and therefore removal of trees required replacement of trees. And Attorney Rifkin straightened me out on that. There is, however, a requirement in the tree ordinance that any removal or pruning of trees on city property requires a permit from the city forester. As far as I know, no one has applied for such a permit, and the city forester has not granted one. That's about all I wanted to mention.
Thank you very much. To that point, let me just say that indeed, I do have in front of me a notice of comment period. Applicant Connecticut Airport Authority. It references a certain application number that concerns Hartford, East Hartford, and Weathersfield. And it indeed seems to be a public hearing, or I'm not sure if it's exactly a public hearing. It's from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, the DEEP, and it's indicating that they will accept public comment for a period of time, I think beginning November 30th through December 27th, through 5 p.m. on December 27th. And it tells you, if you have comment, that here's how you can make the comment. Written comments should be submitted to the hearing officer at Janice, Janice .Deshais, DESHAIS at ct.gov. And anybody who wants to can certainly contact me after this committee meeting to get that contact information, or you can mail it to Janice Deshais at the Office of Adjudications at 79 Elm Street, 5th floor, Hartford, Connecticut, 06106. I will also mention, apropos your comments, Mr. Hale, that we've been advised by Corporation Counsel that despite DEEP conducting this hearing, there's no prohibition to us moving forward in either granting or denying an easement. And I do think council intends to take some action tonight. So let me just recognize Councilman Sanchez, whose hand is up, and then I'll come back to Tom Swar. I saw you, Tom.
You, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if you're hearing me clear. I have to take my visual off so that I can get better signal. And also thank you for chairing. Okay, and also thank you for chairing this committee meeting. First of all, I'd like for Jack Hale, being that he's on this panel and was invited, can you identify your position, Jack?
Sure, I'm chair of the Tree Advisory Commission.
Thank you. Now, with what Jack said, and thank you for sharing that, Councilman Gale. I think it's important that we also hear from a couple of other folks about this easement, and I understand that if or it is my understanding that if this easement doesn't pass, that it is possible that the city of Hartford may be sued by the CAA, and also we will be obligated to spend approximate $1.5 million, at which point it is an opinion and not a fact. So I just want to make sure everyone is clear on that. Thank you for taking my my call.
Okay, got it. I was going back to the public for a moment. Tom Swar, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that there were extensive public hearings on this project probably 4 years ago. This thing has just been languishing. And those hearings led to a lot of the constraints that went into the deep permits controlling this process. So, my understanding is if you don't act on this, we miss the winter window, which is available to do that cutting. And the city will be, liable for any problems that as a result of that. And in effect, CAA is taking over responsibility, the city's responsibility and cost obligation for pruning those trees. So as a taxpayer, I'm a little concerned that we delay too long on this.
Thank you, Tom. Is there any other member of the public that I see Howard Rifkin, you have your hand up, but I want to see if we have any more public comment before we come to you, Howard. Is there any other public comment? Okay, then Attorney Rifkin, Corp Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, because we had a lot of discussion about this at the last committee meeting, but I want to echo what Tom just articulated. The fact is that in 1959, the city of Hartford issued a warranty deed, which essentially it was to the state of Connecticut, which conveyed the property on which Brainerd Airport now sits. But in addition to that, it has a requirement that the city maintain the tree level in the area that abuts Brainerd Airport in a way that is compliant with FAA standards and regulations that promote the safety of aircraft arriving and taking off from the airport. It's my opinion that in the absence of a granting of an easement, a permanent easement to allow the work to be done, the necessary work to be done, it would be the obligation of the city of Hartford to do that work, and we would bear the cost as Tom just mentioned. And the estimated cost of doing this work is about $1.5 million. So and that is an obligation that we have currently under, again, this warranty deed. What we have tried to do is negotiate something with CAA that allows them to come onto the land, do the work, and the cost of that would be borne by the federal government. So I've in the past had a debate with Mr. Hale about the application of the tree ordinance or not to this effort, and with all due respect to Jack, I disagree with his interpretation.
Thank you. Councilman Sanchez, I don't know if your hand is still up, and
Yes.
all right, well, hang on to that thought if you would. I'm going to just read the language from the 1959 deed, and then I'm going to introduce a motion, and we can have further debate on it if you would. So, as Corporation Counsel just pointed out, a lot of this is coming to us tonight by virtue of a deed in 1959 when the city of Hartford deeded the land to the state of Connecticut for the purposes of this airport. And in that deed, the city took on the affirmative obligation. It's a good question as to what the consideration was, but I won't get into that. But the city not only gave land, but then it also said, and we will do the following. And here's what the city said. The city said that the deed says that no structure shall be erected and no trees shall be allowed to grow above the maximum elevations as delineated on said last mentioned map. And Corp Counsel was very, somebody, I think it was Corp Counsel, somebody sent the map around. So we've seen it's map 459. It's recorded in the land records of the city of Hartford. And so the restriction is that no trees are allowed to grow above the maximum elevation as delineated on that last mentioned map, such maximum elevations being on inclined planes extending from field elevation to an elevation of 164 feet above sea level. So it's a very specific easement. And so with that said, I'm going to introduce a motion that says that we're going to send this back to council with a favorable recommendation, provided it is amended as follows. Four things. First, that the right to cut is extinguished if the CAA ceases to operate an airport on these premises. Number two, the right to cut may not be used to allow the operations of CAA to expand beyond their current operations. Number three, that the right to cut is not modified in scope or height beyond the right that I just set out in that deed. So beyond the right that was set out in the deed recorded in volume 124 at page 242 of the Hartford Land Records. And number four, as a tip of the hat to Jack Hale, that any and all permits that are required for cutting are obtained by the CAA.
I second the motion.
I have a second of that motion by Councilwoman Rosado. Now, Councilman Sanchez, would you like to comment?
Yes, I appreciate that. And I thank you, Council President, for seconding that motion. So I would like for our Corporation Counsel, Howard Rifkin, to explain, because one of the things I was pushing for was to have a sunset clause set in there. And I would like for our Corporation Counsel, Howard Rifkin, to explain why apparently the sunset clause is not doable compared to Weathersfield that does have a sunset clause with their easement, I believe for 1.5 years or maybe 1 year. Thank you.
Okay, and Councilwoman Surgeon, I see your hand up. I assume it's okay if we allow
Sure.
our
Go ahead.
counsel to answer the question first?
Sure. Mhm.
Okay. Attorney Rifkin?
Sure, thanks. Very briefly, the easement that Weathersfield has with CAA does have a sunset provision. I think it's a year. The fact is that the area that that is going to be trimmed and cut is much less than what is necessary on the land owned by the city of Hartford. But more importantly, CAA actually will be paying for the work that is being done, not the federal government. Federal government has said very explicitly to us that without a permanent easement, they will not bear the costs of doing the work. So my understanding is in Weathersfield, the estimated cost of doing the trimming and the cutting is $45,000 compared to the $1.5 million estimated cost for the work done on the land owned by the city of Hartford.
Thank you. Councilwoman Surgeon?
Thank you. So you are amending the resolution for those four requirements. Is it something that's going to be sent around, or because Corporation Counsel had also sent a couple of amendments. Are you including those also, Councilman Gale?
I thank you, Councilwoman Surgeon. I believe that the elements that I listed in my motion do encompass at least the first recommendation from Corporation Counsel. And bear with me a minute here. Let me just. Yeah, the Corp Counsel just said, put in there that it would sunset in the event that the Brainerd Airport ceases to operate. Mine is slightly different. It just says if the CAA ceases to operate an airport there, then it's extinguished. But it's the same concept. I think mine's actually a little bit broader. And it says that they're going to seek to minimize the impact of such work upon flora and fauna as part of the required permitting process. I added that they're going to take all permits that are required for that cutting. I think that second resolved, and I'm happy to include it in there. I think it's more aspirational than it is a direction when it just says that they're going to minimize the work upon flora and fauna as part of the required permitting process. But I'm happy to throw that in to the fourth resolved, Councilwoman Surgeon.
Sure. And also pursuant to what I heard from our Corporation Counsel, your fourth amendment regarding a permit, is it if it's needed? Could you repeat that for me again?
That's correct. All permits as required. So they
As
get
required.
legal decisions made as to whether they're, I'm not going to make the decision tonight whether correct or Corp Counsel's correct. We'll just say all permits as are deemed to be required.
And who would make that decision? The Corporation Counsel or Development Services? I don't know who would.
I think there might be a lot of people making that decision because
Okay.
they may also be deep permits. There might be other permitting processes here that are beyond just the city permits. In fact, I think there probably are.
Yeah, but here is my concern is that, DEEP is a state agency. We can't absolutely tell them, they're going to issue a permit or not. Don't you think that's out of our purview? More of what our authority is more of the city of Hartford and what we may require for a permit and not DEEP. And so that is my only concern when you said any and all permit as required. Could you make it say the city of Hartford required?
Councilwoman, I don't think we have a problem saying it.
Okay.
I think that we probably do want to say that any and all permits that are required by anybody, if they want this approval from us, we want them to comply with any and all laws, not just the city of Hartford laws. And I think we have that ability. So I would stay with this language. I mean, I hear you, but I think we have the ability to tell them to comply with anybody who's gonna attempt to regulate this, and it's probably a pretty good thing.
No, I hear you. My only concern is, who is going to who's going to be able to, make sure any and all permits are required, before this tree cutting is done. I'm trying to understand the timing of this. Who's going to oversee to make sure that is being done? Are we just using those terminology, to satisfy, some of our or some of the concerns that are there?
Let's hear from Corp Counsel. I think Attorney Rifkin has his hand up. Maybe he has an answer for you.
Thank you.
I think the answer is found, and it was pointed out to me by Dave Stuber, that in the resolution that is actually before you. And so it says, resolve that all approvals and authorizations provided hereby are contingent upon any approvals, permits, reviews, and similar authorizations that may be required from any agency and or governmental entity having regulatory, advisory, or similar authority over the matters described herein, including but not limited to the Greater Hartford Flood Commission and the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. It seems to me that Mr. Interim Chairman, is more than sufficient and probably more stated in more detail than your amendment. And I would offer that portion of your amendment should be modified or withdrawn.
Understood, and I don't disagree that it's broader. My motion at this point will stay, since whatever I've said in that motion will probably just be mooted out by this broader language. So without getting too complicated here tonight, are there other council comments? Councilwoman Rossetti.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really not necessarily a comment towards your amendment, but this is one of those difficult decisions I find myself in. As a person who has been a huge proponent of trees and will continue to be for all the reasons that we know and more. Understanding also, oh, and Tom Swar, I just saw that, what picture you have for your, that is distracting. I, don't want the city to be held responsible for such a huge, bill, but this is a hard decision for me. And certainly I'm going to look at, the fiscal responsibility, but it's really difficult. And we've made such headway, particularly in the last few years, with many people's help, Jack, Heather, Charmaine on Public Works, Mike Looney, the mayor's office, with rebuilding our tree canopy and continuing to work on that. I just feel like this puts us a step backwards in a different way, but I just wanted to make my feelings known. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Sanchez, is your hand up again?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to echo the same sentiment as Councilwoman Rossetti just mentioned. And one of the things I feel here is that this the dollar sign, right, of the $1.5 million is basically what's being used to hold the city over a barrel. Because if everyone really did their homework, or those that has done their homework will know that once these trees are topped off, or whether it's trimmed, topped off, or cut halfway down, it's going to be another 10, 20, possibly 30 years before these trees reach the same height they're at this point. And I have a hard time, a very difficult time, accepting to allow and approve this easement with a no sunset clause. So that's why I'm supporting the motion you put on the floor that was seconded by Council President Rosado, so that we can cover everything that we need to protect the city. Not only are we trying to protect the city, and I understand, so that the cost doesn't transfer to the city of the 1.5, which is, to me, it's a one-time cost, by the way. Okay. But we also have to protect the city for the future, for our children, our grandchildren, when there's an opportunity to grow the city and to bring down those taxes by development and putting that land on the grand list. So, obviously that's another subject, right? So, I am supporting this motion, and hopefully, we can pass it through.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Councilman.
Mr. Chair.
Further comment, Councilman LeBron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity. I first want to start off strength-based and commend my colleague, Councilman Sanchez, who has been at the forefront of everything regarding the Brainerd Airport, and teaching me and guiding me from the time that I was sworn into the office about paying attention to areas that often our communities aren't being paid attention to, and has a everlasting effect. What I want to say about this area, here we are again with the airport. Not only are we sacrificing an expansive amount of square footage, acreage, whatever language you want to say, we're also getting minimal amount of taxes and dollars and revenue for our city, based upon, if the conversations were held correctly, mutual contracts that were established in the 1950s, which is over 7 decades ago. That is 2 generations that we're still having to adhere to, promises that were made. My grandma has lived a whole life, passed away, rest in peace, grandma. Now, here we go, having to make another sacrifice in the term of trees, right? Trees that Councilwoman Rossetti, I applaud her and all of her Herculean efforts to bring the tree canopy back to Hartford, to teach the community importance of what trees mean. Listening to folks such as Jack Hale and John Gale talk about what trees bring and all these fancy words, and me being this young urban male, not knowing about them, but understanding the value of what they bring. And here we have to cut these trees down because of a promise we made 2 generations ago. And I just want to just publicly comment that we as a city and we as a community, again, sacrificing so much for the experiences of just a few people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Surgeon?
Thank you. Just want to comment through you, Mr. Chair, that I do understand the sentiment of the number of acreage that we have in the city that could possibly be developed for additional revenues and taxes coming into the city. But here we are today, and that is further down the line. We do have a commitment to protect the city and the cost of this potential cost of maintaining the trees. So I am going to vote for the resolution with those amendments, understanding that, I know it's been several 70 or 80 decades ago that this commitment has been made. We are council members, and I'm sure we have made commitments that 70 years from now, whoever is in the council is going to look back and, has to honor the commitments that we made in our 4 years in council. So I will vote for this. I do understand the concept of wanting economic development. I do understand the concept of the tree canopy, but we also have to do our due diligence as council members and as preventing the additional cost to the city residents. So I will vote for this with those amendments.
Further comment? Hearing no further comment. Everybody has the resolution in mind, the motion in mind, rather. All in
Yes.
favor signify by saying aye.
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 Reluctantly, aye.
That sounds unanimous to me. Was there any opposition, any abstentions? Okay.
Go elitism, yay.
All right, thank you. Moving right on now to item number 2 on our agenda tonight, which is resolution calling for Hartford Court of Common Council to work with the city departments to identify ways to create designated tractor trailer parking areas. Do I have a motion to postpone this matter?
So moved.
Second.
There's a second. Okay, we have a motion to postpone and a second. Any discussion about that?
Yes, Tree, why are we postponing it? The city is still not ready for us to discuss that issue?
I'm postponing it because I have a piece of paper on that says postpone, but I do think we have had a lot of discussion about this, and I don't know that we have had ideas come back to us yet. And I think we're waiting for that. But anybody else want to comment on that?
See,
Councilwoman Rossetti?
Again, just from my perspective, Mr. Chair, I did, and I'm not sure where it's at, and that's on me, forward to Council President's office. And again, I needed to follow up with her. It's not all on her. I was approached after this was initially put in the media or the paper from one of the major parking people that they wanted to remind me, Council President, what it was, but they wanted to have a discussion because they possibly had areas, and I don't know if they reached out to Public Works. So I believe that is a discussion that would be, even if it's not them, the kind of things that we were talking about when we initially proposed this.
Yeah, so Adam from my office is trying to put together a Zoom meeting so that we can have further conversation on that. So, it's a couple of departments that have to come to the table. and to hear also public opinion on that. So that's why this item is being postponed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. The only reason I'm apprehensive on this postponement is winter is here. And in a community where, you know, we have the tractor trailer parking on the street, snow cleaning is very difficult around them. You know, I would really like to see this issue be addressed as soon as possible. So I will, you know, agree for the postponement, hoping that by our next PD&H committee meeting in January, we can come to some resolve or some conclusion for adoption of how we're going to address this issue.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I think we all share your point of view on that. I think in the desire to do something, we're looking for input that we could turn into an ordinance so that we would actually be able to take action. And to your point, hopefully that'll be something we can take action on at the next meeting with some specifics that we can then turn into modifications to city ordinances. Councilman Sanchez, your hand is up.
Yes, I'd like to add that I believe one of the ask was to increase the fines that would actually be more effective to these tractor trailers who are illegally parked in the neighborhood. So that's another thing they're looking into as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further comment? We have a motion to postpone on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, unanimous. Okay, item number 3 on the agenda tonight, Mayor Bronin with accompanying resolution authorizing the city of Hartford to acquire the property located at 81-99 Bartholomew Avenue. There was some discussion. I'm just going to lead off by saying there was some discussion as to whether a public hearing had been noticed on this, and I believe we got information this afternoon that a city-held public hearing is not required for this purchase, but that the Planning and Zoning Commission will still conduct an I think it's called an A24 review.
Correct.
All that said, I'm also understanding that we're interested in postponing this tonight to get a better presentation at our meeting on January 4th. So I'll take a motion to postpone if one is put forward.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion to postpone? Okay, seeing no hands, all in favor of postponing this item?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, it's unanimous. Okay, item number 4 is a presentation from Mira on overview and closure, decommission, and statutory exit plan. And I note we have a number of people on the screen, and perhaps you can just identify yourselves as you speak. And then I believe that we have others who are here to speak tonight. I think from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, as well as city employees. But it's Mira's presentation, so let's start with Mira and see where we go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Tom Kirk. I'm president of Mira. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. Also with me is Pete Egan, our Director of Operations, Environment and Development, and our Senior Engineer and Engineering Manager, Dave Bodendorf. We have a very brief presentation, and we'll be happy to answer or address any of the questions the council or members of the public may have at this time. So let me get it started off with just a little bit of a background. Mira is a publicly owned quasi-public organization a creature of the legislature. We own the South Meadows site. It's approximately 83 acres, the site of our recently secured trash-to-energy plant. It's been an industrial and electric generation location since the early 1900s. MIRA and its predecessor, CRRA, have been operating a trash-to-energy plant there since the mid-'80s. But prior to that, it was a host of different industrial, a host to a number of different industrial processes, most notably electric generation, including coal fuel generation and mercury boilers. Prior to taking over the site in a Connecticut Transfer Act event back many years ago, CRA provided for the upgrading and environmental remediation of the facility at a substantial cost. Pete will get into a little bit of that in our brief presentation. But I think the point to remember is it's been for many years a very an industrial site with many prior uses, and the most recent trash energy use by MIRA is the focus of our decommissioning operation, which is underway now. The site is crisscrossed with numerous easements and right-of-ways, most prominently transition high voltage transition lines, and a very substantial regional substation, high voltage substation that serves the city of Hartford and the region. MIRA has the responsibility for certain activities associated with the securing of the operations at the facility, and those responsibilities, those operations are governed by a number of different authorities, most prominently the permit issued by the DEEP under authority by the legislature, and specific statutes and regulations governing MIRA. MIRA is a nonprofit and is by statute required to operate at net cost of operation, meaning we can only charge our customers, can only raise revenue necessary to perform our services. And that's been our means of operation. That's been our practice for the past 30 plus years while operating the South Meadows facility, and similarly in the other 3 projects we had across the states. MIRA does not have the discretion to undertake extra obligational activities if it's not an authorized activity by the statutes. We're not able to undertake it, and that particular concept may be of interest to folks as we determine as a community the future of the Hartford South Meadows site. Finally, any additional activities outside of MIRA's mission and authorizations by statute and permit can be and would be directed by the legislature to MIRA. But at present, we are limited by our permits and by our statutory authorities. And under those limits, we've created a decommissioning facility to essentially erase MIRA's footprint on the site and stand by while the final disposition of the site is determined by others. With that, I'd introduce Pete Egan, who has a short PowerPoint presentation, which he will share on his screen. And also with us tonight is our engineering manager, Dave Bodendorf, who can supplement our comments and answers and also in particular address any issues regarding the Army Corps of Engineers and dike issues for which he has cognizance. With that, Pete, go ahead and take off.
Thanks. Yeah, well, thank you very much, everyone. My name's Peter Egan with Mira. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to share a PowerPoint presentation. So if
Give
I
it a
have-
go and see if you have the ability.
Okay, thank you. I'm having trouble here with my mouse. I'm sorry, hold on. Okay. Can everyone see this PowerPoint presentation?
I believe so.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, I've got about 15 slides here and I'll move through them fairly quickly. So I think everyone here attending tonight's meeting understands what we're referring to. This is an aerial photograph of the facility. There are two components to the waste energy plant. The white building here is the waste processing facility, where historically garbage has been received, has been shredded and processed and manufactured into a refuse-derived fuel. It's then been conveyed over here to the power block facility, which houses the three municipal solid waste combustion boilers and necessary ancillary equipment to combust the garbage, reducing its volume and capturing the energy value that is contained in the garbage, generating steam, which is conveyed to steam turbines, which produce electricity, which Mira has sold out into the ISO New England electric marketplace. Also at the site is a jet turbine facility, which I'll briefly discuss with you in a moment. It's not associated with any solid waste activities. Mira inherited the jet turbine facility in calendar year 2001, when Connecticut Light and Power had to exit the power generation business and sold the property, the jet turbine facility, and the two steam turbines in the power block facility to CRRA at the time. And CRRA began selling power directly into the New England power market. Prior to that, CRA had sold steam to Connecticut Light and Power. Just as an aside, in Hartford, Mira also owns a recycling facility down the street, if you will, on Murphy Road. That facility is dormant. It's been dormant since July 1st. And Mira also owns and operates a solar electric power generating facility on top of the landfill in North Meadows. We have an agreement, several agreements with the city, power purchase agreement, revenue sharing agreement, whereby we share with the city the benefits of that solar array. So I'm going to discuss the closure activities that we've commenced and discuss what we intend to do in order to comply with governing regulation and governing law to compliantly and safely close the facility. So we ceased combustion about 5 months ago. And MIRA has a regulatory obligation to close the facility, and anyone who wants to read the regulations can go to 22A 20913 of the regulations of Connecticut state agencies. It's a very short, several paragraphs. But in a nutshell, DEP has the obligation to ensure that when a solid waste facility is closed, it's done in a manner which preserves and protects natural resources in the environment. I will note for everyone tonight that the regulations that I cite there require that DEP shall approve any post-closure use of the site prior to any post-closure use or activities being undertaken or developed. DEP has the regulatory authority to determine how that site will be used, or at least they have to approve any future use of that site. And I just want to point out that the closure plan and DEP's recent comments, their request for additional information to MIRA are posted on MIRA's website, also along with a letter that the Greater Hartford Flood Commission sent to DEP during in August, commenting on their concerns that they have regarding the dike and ensuring that the dike is protected adequately and safely. I will also note for everyone that MIRA intends to relocate our corporate office to the South Meadows facility, to the waste processing facility. We're going to move into the administration building that was previously occupied by NACE, the operator of the waste energy facility, under contract to MIRA for the last 10 years. So I have several slides here just to talk about the specific activities that we're going to undertake when we proceed with closure activities. We're going to secure and de-energize transformers. If they're taken offline, the transformer oil that is contained within them will be removed. We will lock out electrical systems. We've actually already locked out a number of systems to ensure that they are not inadvertently turned on, and to ensure that we continue to work towards minimizing the power consumption that the facility continues to demand. Floor drains in the waste processing facility will be cleaned. We've already disconnected one of the 2 natural gas lines. And we've disconnected it at the street with Connecticut Natural Gas. We will clean the conveyors and the shredders and the trommels that contain residue of garbage and the shredded refuse-derived fuel. We will clean the bag houses and the cyclone separators that were in place to ensure that dust was properly collected from the shredding activities. And we will clean and decontaminate the interior building surfaces at the waste processing facility. And as some of you know, 22 years ago, an air handling system was installed at the waste processing facility, along with a large addition to the building of a maneuvering hall. And that was all undertaken in order to control odors. All of that ductwork will be cleaned. And the way that that system operated was by essentially constantly pulling a vacuum on the waste processing facility and conveying that air over to the power block facility, where it was used as makeup air for combustion. All of that air handling ductwork will be cleaned and at some point scrapped for its value. Now, at the power block facility, it's a little heavier lift, if you will. Again, we have transformers that we will manage, as I previously discussed, and electrical systems that we already have locked out. We will clean floor drains. We have already shut off the natural gas that comes into the building. We've not severed the line at the street, but we've shut the gas off. One of the larger activities will be to clean the coal pond. There is a pond, an impoundment, if you will, a storage area that historically was used to store coal. The facility combusted coal from its inception to about calendar year 2004, and that coal supplemented the garbage that we combusted. But we haven't burned coal now for more than a decade. But there is still coal in the pond that will have to be removed and conveyed off-site, either to landfill or possibly to a coal burning facility that will burn it. Also in the coal pond is solids, small particulate solids, predominantly ash residue from the building, the ash loadout building and other parts of the building. And that is accumulated, particularly in one end of the pond, and that material will have to be removed. The pond contains an impervious liner. It's underlain by an impervious liner. And the removal process will need to ensure that that liner is not compromised. There is a building that we refer to as the ash loadout building and an associated truck wheel wash building. Those will be decontaminated to remove the ash residue in there. There are conveyors within the building that conveyed ash from the bottom of the boilers. The grates would move the ash into a quench bath. The ash was pulled out of the quench baths and conveyed to the ash loadout building. And also the pollution control equipment in place. The bag houses filtered out fly ash that was contained in the flue gas that was generated by the combustion activities. And that fly ash was also conveyed through a system, again, to the ash loadout building. Those conveyors will be cleaned and decontaminated. We've already removed all of the filter fabric bags from all 3 bag houses. And that material, those bags were shipped off site in August. There is a piece of equipment, actually 3 of them, called air heaters. They were in place to preheat the combustion air, some of which came from the waste processing facility and some of which came from the atmosphere, so that when the air was introduced into the actual boiler, it was warmer than atmospheric air. And that helped with the efficiency of operating the boilers. We will clean the boilers and the grates. Although they've essentially been cleaned before NACE exited, we cleaned all 3 boilers, the superheaters, the water walls. And we feel at this point, actually, that all of the steel associated with a boiler, water wall tubes and superheater metal, that can be removed as is and shipped off site to a properly licensed metal recycling facility. In fact, we've been doing that for 30 years as we've replaced sections of the boilers. We shipped the sections that were removed to properly licensed recycling facilities. And then we have wastewater treatment system on site. The treatment that we did was essentially a neutralization of wastewater that was generated from inside the power block facility. That system will need to be cleaned, the tanks cleaned. Any solids that are generated would need to be shipped off site. And my last slide here on the power block facility, there are some radioactive sources. There are 25 of them. These are contained in a piece of equipment that was used to monitor the level of flowable solids. Essentially the bag houses, the hoppers that contained the bags that filtered out the ash. As the bags were regularly shaken to drop out the fly ash, the ash would accumulate in a hopper and be removed from the hopper. The radioactive sources that measured the level of the ash were there to monitor any time that the ash level started to increase to an unacceptable level. There are 25. We have a Nuclear Regulatory Commission license for these sources. And we also have a license from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. All 25 devices contain the radioisotope cesium-137. We actually are moving ahead now to remove these. We hope to have them off site by February. We don't need approval from DEEP to do this. We just have to do it in a compliant manner, and we want to get them off site as soon as possible. So we're not going to wait for the main when we begin most of the closure activities. We're going to do this as soon as we can. We're going to clean stormwater drainage conduits. The last two bullets here have to do with the flood control dike. We need to secure the cooling water intake structures and the discharge outfalls. MIRA needs to ensure that all the penetrations that are in the dike through which cooling water has been taken into the plant and through which cooling water has been discharged out of the plant are properly secured and permanently secured such that they do not pose a risk to future intrusion of water from the river across the dike onto the property. And I'd like to advise this committee that separately from addressing, responding to DEEP's request for additional information and finalizing the closure plan with DEEP, we're going to separately address concerns of the Hartford Flood Commission that they expressed in a letter that they sent to DEEP in August. We are arranging a meeting with the city, with one or two individuals from DEEP's dam regulation group, and one or two individuals from the Army Corps of Engineers up in Waltham, Massachusetts, hopefully for the second week in January. I'm actually going to confirm that meeting, I think, tomorrow with everyone for Tuesday, January 10th, I think it is. The purpose of that meeting will be to ensure that we have on the table all of the concerns of the city, the Army Corps, and DEEP with regard to the dike, so that we can ensure that we undertake any activities to secure that dike safely as we're required to under law. Now, quickly, I just wanted to point out that the jet turbine facility is going to continue to operate through May. It's a fast start electric generating facility. It's actually been on site since about 1970, 69. And it's not associated with solid waste activities. When we do close it, the plan is to undertake a solicitation to sell or scrap the equipment. We will remove all the remaining jet fuel and ensure that jet fuel tank is cleaned. I've got 3 or 4 or 5 slides here just to discuss the remediation activities that have taken place that Mr. Kirk briefly mentioned over the last 22 years. The property was transferred to CRA from Connecticut Light and Power in 2001, as I described earlier. When that happened, it was determined that the site was subject to Connecticut's Transfer Act because it met the definition of an establishment. Because of that, the transfer of the property created an obligation for a party to remediate the property. The party could have been the owner, it could have been the seller, or it could have been a third party. And the property, it was necessary to remediate it to meet the remediation standard regulations, the governing law in Connecticut. What happened was a third party stepped in and agreed for a price to accept the risk of remediating the property. And that risk was transferred to the certifying party, was TRC Environmental. MIRA used proceeds from the buy down of the power purchase agreement that it had in place with Connecticut Light and Power to purchase an insurance policy. We paid in excess of $25 million. And for the last 22 years, remediation has been ongoing and is essentially complete. And when I say essentially complete, what I mean is it's been remediated to industrial and commercial standards under the RSRs. It has not been remediated to meet residential standards. It's been remediated to meet industrial commercial standards as applicable for operation of a facility such as the one that is there right now. Quite a bit of remediation has been undertaken, and I mentioned some of the highlights right here in this slide. Facility, when the verification report is fully complete and accepted by DEP, will meet the industrial commercial remediation standards under Connecticut law. There will be environmental land use restrictions in place whereby DEP essentially governs any disruptions to the land, to if there's any activities where digging has to be undertaken, DEP will have to approve that. The environmental land use restrictions are recorded on the land records. All of the interest holders have subordinated their easements to the environmental land use restriction that will be in place. And there's about 19 areas subject to do not disturb restrictions. There are a number of interest holders, the larger ones being Connecticut Light and Power. They have about 15 acres of easements and right-of-ways, but others include Southern New England Telephone, MDC, the Flood Commission, City of Hartford, and there are others. And that's the status of the remediation of the subsurface property. at the 80-acre site. We submitted a verification report to DEEP in June of 2018. Unfortunately, when Eversource was undertaking some activities a year later or a few months later, they found some contamination that had not been previously identified. And so that contamination has to be addressed, and it is being addressed, and that additional activity is almost complete. And when it is complete, DEP should then be in a position to approve and accept the verification report. So that's all I have for presentation on closure activities and what MIRA intends to do. And so I think at this point, Tom or myself or Mr. Bodendorf can take questions, or you proceed however you want, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Egan and Mr. Kirk. And I think that perhaps you can stop sharing your screen.
Certainly.
But be ready to pull it back up if somebody asks to see it. I understand that we have one or two people from DEEP that are here. And so before I open it up to questions, I think we should probably hear from DEEP, unless you folks from DEEP tell me differently. I'm prepared to let you comment about what you've just heard, and then we'll open it up to some questions.
So thank you, Chairman Gale. So I'm Jennifer Perry. I'm the Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Materials Management and Compliance Assurance at Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And I also have with me this evening Gabrielle Freegon, who is our Division Director of our Waste Engineering and Enforcement Division. And we have not prepared any presentation for the commission or really prepared any remarks. But at the request of the commission, we are here to, I think, answer any questions that any of the council or any members of the public may have of us in regards to the closure plan or, other potential activities that may occur on this site.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I know that I have received a number of written comments in advance. And I know that the nature of this conversation, I think, is going to be both comments back to both MIRA and DEEP, as well as specific questions. But before I get into that, I want to also recognize we have Director Mike Looney from our Department of Public Works, along with at least one member of his staff, Frank Delaripa. And I don't know, Director Looney, did you want to comment, or are you also here to listen and answer some questions?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks to MIRA, to Tom and Peter for the presentation. It's always interesting to hear how things are progressing. Yes, I mean, from the standpoint of the Department of Public Works and to a certain extent the city, we have a lot of concerns about this closure plan. First and foremost, and as was alluded to by Mr. Egan, the concerns raised by the Hartford Flood Commission. With the proximity of this facility to the levee system that protects the south end of Hartford, it's so intricately woven into the fabric of that system that I think it's going to be a very, very complex task to make sure that everything that needs to be done to secure penetrations to the levee walls and some of the infrastructure that is down there that coexists with our levee system, that it's going to take some time and a lot of hard work to make sure that is done right. And it's not as simple as plugging some holes or or anything like that. I am encouraged that Mira has reached out to both my staff and to the Army Corps to have this meeting in the beginning of January after the new year, so we can hash out some of these issues. Quite frankly, we could probably spend a couple of hours just talking about flood commission concerns related to this closure plan. I guess leaving that aside, my greatest concern about from a city standpoint of this closure plan is the fact that my understanding in reading the plan is that it projects a cost of roughly $3.8 million or so for closure activities. And that previously TRC was referenced as a certifying party earlier in Mr. Egan's presentation, had done in 2013, had done a similar proposed closure plan that was looking in the range of a $13 to $19 million effort. A big portion of that, the difference between the two price tags, was the remediation and demolition of the actual facilities themselves, not the soil or the underlying soils that are on the site, but just bringing down that facility. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned extensively and remediated within the building before you could even demo it. And of course, there's the pretty extensive cost of demolition. And so my concern is that without that piece being a part of this closure plan, that we're going to end up with a site with a very large deteriorating physical structure, actually a number of structures. If the site is not brought down to its current grade, and that we're going to continue to have this potential threat for property damaging events, structural fires, natural disasters that may occur, just trying to keep the building secure from folks who might be trying to get in to try to salvage materials or things like that, and that we're just going to continue to have this eyesore sitting down in the South Meadows. I feel it's just a disservice to the community to have that continue to be a presence, regardless of what environmental remediation has been done to date over the last 2 decades, based upon what Mira inherited from CL&P. This plant has always been a serious environmental justice issue, but I think just as importantly, how we handle the final disposition and closure of this plant is just as important, if not more so, environmental justice issue, particularly for our residents in the South End, and that it's one of these properties and facilities that it's already had a century of impact on our city. I would like to see it brought to at least to a point where we start to cap off those negative externalities and not have another century of a languishing facility that we're struggling to find a way to clean up and protect the community from. So those are just my basic remarks, and I will turn it over back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Looney. Mr. Kirk or Mr. Egan, would you like to comment on Director Looney's concerns about the difference between the closure plan and actually demolition of the structures?
Yes, I can offer just a brief comment. Director Looney is correct. Back in 2018 timeframe, for a potential redevelopment concept that was being floated by a coalition of groups, an additional study was undertaken to identify what a site preparation plan would look like, and that was priced at about substantially higher than the decommissioning menu of options. That development plan was it didn't move forward, obviously, but those numbers are correct. I'm not certain they're very indicative of what the cost would be today to demolish the buildings and bring the site down to grade. That's another study, I believe, that would have to be executed to get more reasonable numbers and order of magnitude costs.
Would you like to comment as to why that's not included? It's part of the part of the closure plan, why demolition is not included?
Yes, the demolition of the existing building isn't required by statute or permit.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just point out it in the Connecticut regulations for state agencies, within that section 22A-209-13, closing of solid waste facilities, there is a subsection in there, subsection B, where it states that the commissioner, this would be the commissioner of DEEP, may require any action or the submission of any information which he deems necessary to ensure the proper closing of any facility, so as to preserve and protect the natural resources and environment in the state of Connecticut.
That sounds very much, Director, like you're throwing it back at DEEP, saying, why aren't you going to require that this property be brought down to grade and demolished? Comment from DEEP without answer. I mean, this may be a long conversation, but just throwing that out there.
Jen, do you want me to
Go
take
ahead,
it?
Gabby. I was going to speak to the existing environmental land use restrictions
Right.
sort of as step one, but I think we could probably kind of do a combined effort here. So the environmental land
Sure.
use restrictions that are already in place for this site based on the remediation that has occurred to date, those actually prohibit demolition of certain buildings, excavation in certain areas, because those environmental land use restrictions are based on what that projected use would be. So industrial commercial use of this facility and prohibition of residential activities, and potentially any exposure to humans. So that's driving part of this. I think to the question about specific to the regulations that govern solid waste closure plan, which is really what we're dealing with at the current time. I think, Gabby, you could probably add some more to that.
Sure. With respect to the citation in the regulations, you are correct, Director Looney. The determination as to how clean a solid waste facility has to be rendered at the end of its life is dependent on its post-closure use. And what I usually, the analogy I usually use is if it's a solid waste facility and it's going to be a solid waste facility again, then that level of clean is very different to it's going to be a daycare facility after the solid waste facility closes. So the level of how clean a property needs to be rendered at the end of the solid waste facility's life is dependent on its next use. It depends on what the post-closure use it may be intended by the property owner. The property owner in this case is Mira, but Mira has indicated that that they can't make a determination regarding what the post-closure use will be, since they're no longer going to be operating a solid waste facility. And I think that's a point for discussion that we will likely have to have with Mira during the review of the additional information that we have requested, in response to the closure plan that was submitted. So I think additional conversation will be had. The other point that I want to, I'm sorry. The other point that I wanted to make with respect to the land use restrictions, they can be redressed. It's not necessarily one and done, but to evaluate post-closure use that is more liberal than industrial commercial will require additional funds because there will be additional requirements regarding potentially additional requirements pertaining to site cleanup, modifying the cap and the buildings are being used as the cap to certain areas of the property, hence their prohibition from demolition under the current land use restriction.
Thank you, Gabrielle. That's the land use restrictions makes perfect sense as to why certain areas couldn't be demolished. And I totally get your point about future use being a driving factor. My only thing would be I would posit that, at least in my opinion, the fact that the structure continues to remain in a community such as ours, which is at significant disadvantages in a number of different ways, that the community in which it resides is also an important consideration as to how clean a facility should be. But again, that's just my personal opinion. And thank you very much for the clarification on the land use and the reason why we can't necessarily do demo. I would just like to, my only reason for citing the statute or for the regulations was to note that the commissioner has very broad power in terms of what she decides should happen here, and we should just keep all options on the table. And if there is some way to get this site as clean as possible, we should always pursue that avenue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll cede the floor.
Well, don't go too far away. No, thank you for those comments. And I just want to, before I open it up to other questions, I just would like the Ms. Freegon, do we say?
Yes.
Just if you could comment, you mentioned that post-closure use is going to be a point of discussion, and I'm just wondering, you've got a crowd of elected officials here and other interested people who I imagine would love to be a part of that discussion. I'm wondering if you can tell us how that discussion takes place and whether or not there will be any input or ability to provide input from elected officials and members of the public with respect to the post-closure use of this facility.
The department is absolutely always willing to hear comments and suggestions from the general public and the elected officials. Absolutely willing to hear and take those comments and suggestions under advisement. The regulatory structure under which we're currently operating requires the owner of the property or the operator of the facility. Can you hear me? Because everything froze.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
good. So so the regulatory structure requires the owner or the operator, it can be either one, to propose the extent of closure activities that they want to undertake in light of what a future use might be. Whether or not the elected officials agree with that post-closure use is something we would definitely want to hear about, and may impact how the commissioner basically rules on, approves or conditions the approval of a closure for that facility. But the commissioner has discretion, as Director Looney indicated. And those conversations are generally between the department and the property owner or the proposer of the closure plan. But again, we are definitely open to hearing the comments, the concerns, and the suggestions from all of those that are or may be impacted by the outcomes.
Thank you for that. Now, I note that there's some other folks on the screen, and I'd just like to recognize or ask first if there's any other government, anybody else representing either the city or the state who's here to comment. And I think there's also perhaps one or more board members from MIRA that are here, and I want to ask if any of the board members from MIRA want to comment before we turn it over to members of the public and the council?
Councilman, I'll volunteer to say a few words. Folks who don't know me, I'm Dave Stuber. I'm Mayor Brown's chief of staff. I also happen to be a member of the board of directors of MIRA as of about 12 months ago. I'll just add, I'll associate myself with the comments made by Director Looney earlier and echo them. I suppose I would just also add that, you know, from my perspective, to place some of this conversation in a bit of a broader context, you know, the city of Hartford and the people of Hartford have made quite substantial sacrifices, I would say, for the sake of serving the solid waste needs of the region of Central Connecticut over quite a long period of time. As everyone lives in the city will be familiar with, we have a large landfill that sits in the North Meadows on the banks of the Connecticut River here in Hartford. And so that is land that has been permanently despoiled by the solid waste needs of past generations of residents all across Central Connecticut. And now, we've for the past 3.5 decades or so, we've been host to the incineration plant operating in the South Meadows. And I think that, in full recognition of the sacrifice that has entailed on the part of the people of Hartford over many, many decades, I think that it's incumbent upon, I would say, the state as a whole and all of us, living in Connecticut, to see that this site is remediated to a level that will allow for its redevelopment and reuse in a way that would benefit the broader community of Hartford and our economy over the long haul. And so toward that end, personally, kind of how I view matters where they stand, the closure plan that has been laid out and was described this evening by Mr. Kirk and Mr. Egan, I think it represents a first step on the road toward a more comprehensive site remediation that would allow for redevelopment of the site. And ultimately speaking, MIRA is a creation of state statute. From where we sit today, it is not too hard to imagine or foresee a date in the not too distant future at which MIRA might potentially be dissolved by the state legislature as its various operations, contractual obligations are wound down. And so ultimately, the MIRA plant site and MIRA's other assets are assets of the state of Connecticut. And so I think it'll be important for all of us in Hartford as residents and elected and appointed officials to advocate with our partners and stakeholders in state government for to express the importance to our community of seeing the site remediated and potentially redeveloped for a higher use. And I think that those conversations will be ongoing, but will likely take some number of years to fully play out.
Thank you, Dave. I see we have a couple of members of the Solid Waste Task Force on the screen. This is a task force that was convened, I believe, at the request of Councilman Sanchez several years ago, that's been consistently looking at some of these same issues. So would any member of the task force like to comment at this time?
Yeah,
Mr. Swart, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I understand that MIRA is not in a position to decide the future use of that site, but I think it's fairly safe to assume that it will be very difficult to have any future waste management operations on that site to ever survive an EJ process. So I don't understand, or I don't agree with the decision to leave the equipment in place. And I think the building should be emptied of all equipment for whatever salvage value that can be recovered, even if it's only selling the material as scrap metal. Another concern that I have that kind of gets lost in the details is the stormwater management for that site after closure. The water flow was previously used as makeup water. That use has gone away, so there's going to be a need to send stormwater somewhere. And I'm very concerned about maintaining the quality of the Connecticut River. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about how that will be addressed going forward and how the city will be kept informed of some of these, ongoing monitoring of the site and, management to make sure that those caps are maintained in place. And I might also just comment, not to throw too much cold water on our development plans, but maybe the people from DEEP can help me here. But I am not aware of any practical method for remediating coal ash contamination. The site is underlaid by a 10 to 15 foot layer of fill that's predominantly coal ash. And to my knowledge, the only thing you can do with that is dig it up and send it to an even poorer community. So, I think we're looking at perhaps industrial commercial use for this site, but, I don't anticipate seeing a marina there anytime soon.
Thank you, Mr. Squire. I don't know if Mr. Kirk or Egan, if you want to respond to anything you've heard before I move on.
No, I don't have any response at this point.
I would just add that Tom's concerns over stormwater management are a focal point. Post decommissioning, stormwater management are a major focus of the decommissioning plan, and will absolutely be addressed.
Thank you. Any other member of the Solid Waste Task Force here that wants to comment? I don't know if I'm seeing any. All right, I'm going to move on to a member of the public. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment and or ask questions? Okay, it's council time. Council members. Councilman Sanchez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so earlier in the presentation, it was mentioned that the city of Hartford is receiving benefits from the, I'm not sure if it was from the JES, because I don't know whether it's from Mr. Kirk or Mr. Egan. Can you elaborate on what benefits the city is receiving that was mentioned earlier?
I'm sorry, Mr. Sanchez, I didn't hear your question. You were breaking up.
Can you elaborate on the benefits that was mentioned that the city is receiving from this facility? I was not aware of any benefits from probably the JET. I'm not sure where this benefit is coming from. So can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I certainly can. I was referring to the landfill, sir, and the solar electric generating facility at the landfill. That facility spins off several $100,000 worth of value each year, and Mira and the city share and enjoy the benefit of that on an equal basis.
In what manner?
Well, first of all, the power that's produced from the solar panels is used directly by the DPW facility next door. And for that, the city pays Mira 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour. If the city had to go out and purchase that power today, the city would be paying about 20 cents a kilowatt hour. That's a very significant savings to the city. And secondly, the facility produces zero emission reduction credits. And we receive revenue from those every year. And we share 50-50 those revenues with the city. I think in round numbers, the city receives a benefit of probably about $225,000.
Okay, are you able to send those documents or to the council so that we can review those benefits? It's the
Certainly.
first time I hear this, and so that's the landfill and the solar. So, are there any benefits that we're receiving because we're talking about the mirror facility, and I'd like to know if there's any benefits from that area.
The MIRA pays a host benefit payment to the city. At this time, these past several years, it's been $1.5 million a year. That's a
Right.
payment.
I'm aware of the host fee. That's an obligation where back in 2015, it was $4.6 million until it was unfortunately renegotiated to a loss of $3 million. So I think it should have stayed. I just feel that there was a miscommunication of some sort where that reduction went down to 1.5. I really don't consider that a true benefit, but thank you for answering my question.
Certainly, sir.
Thank you, Councilman Sanchez. Anyone else? I have a couple of questions myself, but I'll certainly recognize any other council member first. Okay, well, I've received some comments before this meeting, and so I'd like to throw some of these questions out, if I may. My understanding is that MIRA does have some cash assets, and that those cash assets may be as much as $20 million. We've heard that the plan for closure right now is about has a price tag of 3.8 million, if I'm not mistaken. We've also heard that the city of Hartford has borne the brunt of MIRA's activities over the course of its entire existence, and of course, CRRA before that and CLMP before that. So I'm wondering what is the plan for the additional assets that MIRA has, and whether that plan could include spending that money to further prepare this property for, I think what going back to that deep comment, what its post-closure use will be, which I think will not be as a power generation plant, but something else, which would probably require that these buildings not be there. So could you comment on that?
I can certainly comment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. The MIRA does have cash, as any operating entity would be expected to have. We presently have continuing obligations to 25 municipalities to provide recycling and waste disposal services through June of 2027. And our planning, financial planning, and our annual budgets are designed according to our statutory requirements to be a net cost of operation provider and to charge tipping fees and consume reserves as necessary to not make a profit and ensure that our towns are not being overcharged. So there is not any free cash flow available under our present operating statutory authorities to expand the scope of any additional work on the site. If additional work on the site is called for new uses, that would typically be a developer's cost, or since it is publicly owned land, a legislative decision to invest in development of the site.
Well, I certainly hope, because there's been, at least a statement was made to me that some of this money could be used to reduce tipping fees for other towns. And I don't, I'd like you to comment directly as to whether any of your excess cash is going to be used to reduce the costs for any of your remaining member towns.
The cost of service by statute is the charges the revenue we raise are limited to establish the net cost of operation. So our tip fees are established based on what is necessary to provide the services, recycling and disposal services to our customer towns. Often our budgets are set such that they will, at the end of the fiscal year, generate more cash than was anticipated or operate at a deficit. So we do maintain reserves, but those reserves are essentially pre-collected tip fees and are used to manage and balance the tip fees in the following fiscal year. So the cash that would be necessary for additional work at the site in advance, in anticipation of development, would need to come from other sources than the tipping fees from the existing towns.
So that if going back to this conversation with Deep, if in conversations with the state government and Deep, there's a different post-closure use that's developed, there may be use of some of your own reserves together with new money to cover the costs of that, preparing the site for this new post-closure use.
If I understand your question correctly, the existing reserves of MIRA would be consumed by the approved decommissioning plan, which is being managed through cooperation with DEEP, and any additional development or site work in anticipation of development would be funded elsewhere.
Okay, I'm not sure if I saw Councilman Sanchez had raised his hand.
Yes, I did.
Did you? Go ahead, Councilman Sanchez. You want to weigh in on that?
Yes. So I have a question here, and that question is, what's the total asset besides the 20 million plus? Is my understanding. What's the total asset of what MIRA has, including facilities in other towns in the state of Connecticut? And are these funds also going to be used for severance pay?
I can't speak to the exact or the particulars of our net assets. Our financial reports are available, filed with the states, and are very detailed. And if there are additional questions, I would point you to our chief financial officer. I'm certain he can provide you all the details of interest. The other facilities we have, there are a few. There are some land holdings, some minor revenue sources, rents at a Bridgeport trash energy plant, some small acreage parcels associated with prior projects of the of MIRA or CRRA. They are very modest and of little consequence to the discussion today. They don't amount to a lot of a value in terms of dollars. The severance, yeah, you alluded to. There were retention payments paid to about 140 employees, 114 employees rather, of our contractor, and about 12 MIRA employees during the past year in order to ensure continued operation of the facility after the facility closure date was announced. A portion, about I'm guessing about 80% of those payments were made. An additional 20% were saved because some folks chose to leave MIRA or leave our contractor before becoming eligible for that severance or that retention payment. All of those all of those costs were budgeted in a prior fiscal year budget and have been paid out or reserved.
Councilwoman, whoops.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just want to know, can you share whether you're able to share with the council, or if it's through DEEP, if DEEP can share with the council the figures that's been calculated for that? But the reason why I asked about the assets as far as property is concerned, that I feel that those properties can be auctioned off or sold so that it can also be a revenue to help and clean up this facility in the area. If the facility or the structure cannot be torn down, demolished, at the very minimum, the internal parts can be cleaned, the equipment can be removed, as Mr. Swore mentioned, auctioned off or sold for scrap, whatever have you. That's the reason why I'm asking this question. I'd like to know what dollar amount equates to those assets so that we can, at least at the very minimum, use that for the cleanup. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Kirk?
I'm not sure that question was directed to me. I cannot guess at the value of the equipment in the facility. Typically, a more typical demolition of a power plant might end up with a negative value. The value of the scrap metal inside being used to mitigate and reduce the cost of demolition. But we really don't have much information at all other than that very preliminary high altitude examination back in 2013. The value of the real estate holdings MIRA has is very modest and doesn't really amount to anything approaching the kinds of numbers we're talking about here.
Okay, I understand may not amount to anything, but I'd like to hear what the figure could be, the equator figures to those assets. And one last question. Hello?
Go ahead. We didn't hear the beginning of what you said, but go ahead. We can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Just I still like to know what the figures are for those modest real estate that MIRA owns. Also, the status of the jet engines, the turbines. What's the revenue that they generate, at least for the last year and to date this year?
I thank you, Councilman Sanchez. Yeah, we can. These specific real estate assets remaining in the portfolio of MIRA are available informationally in our financial reports, and the taxable value of those is available. And our chief financial officer can provide that to your office.
Yes, please.
Would be happy to do that. As to the jets that Pete talked about earlier are consist of 4 twin pack Pratt & Whitney FT4 engines and accompanying generators. They are quick start generators or black start generators, battery start, originally designed back in the 60s to provide blackout protection for the region, meaning that in a wholesale blackout, we could push a button, start those engines, and provide energy, originally sufficient power to start up the cooling pumps at the nuclear plant down Millstone. Since the 60s, of course, they have been in use very occasionally. A typical year, they are operated for putting aside testing and startup maintenance, maybe a dozen to 2 dozen hours a year. They are essentially reserve units, occasionally used for voltage support to generate VARs, VARS, electrical term for support of voltage support in the region, but typically don't run at all. So there's essentially zero income associated with the energy sales from those plants, those generators, because they don't run. They are, however, very valuable for purposes of reserve, and we receive a reserve payment over many years that has been very substantial. At its peak a number of years ago, $16 million, and that has declined to $6 million in its final year of operation. Those plants will be secured permanently in May of this coming year, 2023, and will no longer be operated because of their emissions profile.
Okay, so and I'm sorry to take up more time. So I'm just trying to understand this with the turbines. So last year, what was the revenue that was generated by the turbines, and also at what was it sold at 2 cents a watt or to Eversource? Just trying to get a handle on this.
Last year, and I presume you're talking about the jet turbines. Last year, we had about 20 or 25 hours of operation, and if they are called to operate, they are 160 megawatts, which is a small amount of energy. They would be paid the cost of the fuel, essentially, and typically no more. They're very expensive to operate. They're liquid fuel, aviation derivative engines, and operate on aviation fuel, which is very expensive from a BTU basis. The age of the units make them very inefficient from a heat flow basis. So there's essentially no revenue associated with the operation of the machine. Whatever revenue is associated revenue of value associated with those machines is from the fact that their existence on site to be able to react and fast start is worth about $6 million per year this past year.
So is that $6 million that you spent to run the turbines, or is that $6 million in revenue? It's my understanding that they do create a revenue, and that revenue in the past was used to subsidize the towns, the 79 towns that you served previously.
That's correct. The revenue from the jets is part of the originally of the MidCon project, because the jets were purchased from Connecticut Light and Power with assets belonging to the MidCon project, the 70-town consortium of which Hartford was a member. And since that point, the jet's revenue, to the extent in the revenue totals for the MidCon project, and later what we call the CSWA project, Connecticut Waste Services Agreement project.
So at this moment, you still can't give me a figure of the revenue that those turbines has given last year, the previous year, or even this year. You don't have
$6 million a year.
Okay. At what cost are you selling this electricity, the wattage?
We don't really make any. It only operates a handful of hours per year. It's almost like it's a lease payment. We could look at it that way. We don't sell any electricity with them, or we haven't, and we won't unless there's a disaster and a blackout.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let me move on to Councilwoman Surgeon, who's been patiently waiting here.
Oh, absolutely. It's okay. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm learning tons from Councilman Sanchez's questions, so I didn't mind at all. But we do have a resident who is actually attending the meeting and listening, and did not know that they could have come and asked their questions. So they have texted me the questions. So through you, Mr. Chair, if I could pose those questions to Mr. Kirk.
Sure.
Great. The first question they ask is, how many Hartford residents and contractors does MIRA have?
MIRA has, or will have a total of 12 employees. I believe, I don't know. Pete, do you know the exact number?
15
of Hartford residents?
Of Hartford residents? No, I don't.
Okay.
There'll be 15 employees after the end of February.
Okay. So to follow up to that, so how many may have been laid off or have found other jobs? And so there's 15 employees. How much was the original number of employees?
MIRA employees have shrunk from a high of about 60 employees a number of years ago to the present anticipated 15. Our contractor base, which is where most of our CRA or MIRA beneficial employees would reside, was at a peak of about 250 and reduced substantially in the past year with the closure of the Hartford facility. We presently operate with probably about 45 contract employees at our 2 transfer stations.
Great. One of the other questions they've asked is, how many minorities are on the board?
I'm not, what qualifies as a minority?
Latinos, Black, African-American, women, how many total board and how many minorities are on the board?
There are 11 board seats. There are 10 members present. There is 1 female member, and I hesitate to make a declaration about the ethnicity of a couple of the members. I'm sorry. I'd prefer not to do that.
Sure. Any other properties is subject to the Transfer Act? When that came out of your presentation, you talked about the Transfer Act, the responsibility to remediate hazardous waste. So do you have any other properties that are subject to this?
Yes, other properties owned by CRA Mira would be subject to the Transfer Act, yes. I believe all of our properties would be.
No, let me answer that question, Tom. The answer is right now, I don't believe we have any. We did have a recycling facility in Stratford, Connecticut that we sold, and it met the definition of an establishment, and we went through the Transfer Act process when we conveyed that property about 6 or 7 years ago. We do own vacant parcels of land adjacent to several landfills. Those actually are the responsibility of DEEP now, although Mira still owns the property. And we owned actually 3 landfills for which DEEP is responsible. None of those are subject to the Transfer Act. The only other
wouldn't
parcel,
the recycling facility on Murphy Road and the underlying land at the Bridgeport Trish Energy Plant be subject to Transfer Act if sold?
I don't think the recycling facility on Murphy Road meets the definition of establishment based on my knowledge of the history of that building and that property. The land underlying the Bridgeport Waste to Energy facility, which Mira owns and leases to Wheelabrator, may meet the definition of an establishment when it is conveyed at some point in the future. I don't know the answer without, doing some research.
And wouldn't the landfills also, be subject to the CT Transfer Act if sold? In the unlikely event we ever find a buyer?
Actually, you're correct. At least one of them would be.
Okay. And I think the last question, and maybe I should have asked that before I talked about the Transfer Act, is any waste or additional contamination at other properties owned by Mira and the dollar value of liability.
Could you repeat that question, ma'am?
Sure. The question was, do you have any waste or additional contamination at other properties owned by Mira? And if so, what is the dollar value of the liability of this contamination?
I think the answer is no. We have no, Pete, you're probably better to answer that.
Yes, thank you. The landfills that we own and the several parcels of land adjacent to the landfills are contaminated. They have pollution underlying them. We are not responsible for that pollution any longer. So to answer your question with regard to those properties, yes, they're contaminated. No, we do not have liability. I don't believe there is any liability associated with our other piece of property in Hartford. There will be liability, I expect, associated with the property that is underlying the Bridgeport Waste to Energy plant when that plant is finally closed one day and has to go through a closure process. Based on my understanding of the history of that site, it's contaminated, and that would present a liability.
I think those are the questions that were asked by the resident who was watching the committee meeting. And so I only have one question myself. And from your presentation, what I think I learned is the cleanup is to a commercial level cleanup. Am I correct in saying that?
Industrial and commercial,
Industrial,
correct.
okay. So is there funds, or how do we get, if we wanted, should the property ever came back to the city of Hartford and we would love to develop the property? Is there an estimated cost of residential remediation? Residential? I'm sorry?
Pete, would you like to take
Yeah,
a shot at answering the question on which I understand to be what is the differential in cost to bring an 83-acre site such as the South Meadows to residential development quality?
yeah.
Yes.
I'm not prepared tonight to even take a guess at what that figure might be.
Other than it would be quite large.
It would be, yeah, it would be somewhere in the 8 figures. I don't know where. It would require extensive additional investigation and then costing out the cost of remediating what you learn in your investigation. But as Mr. Swar pointed out earlier, there is coal ash underlying that whole site. It's been remediated to meet the industrial commercial standards, which allow the material to have been left in place. Much soil was removed, 60,000 tons of soil, quite a bit, but much was left in place. To meet residential standards, a lot more material would have to be removed and shipped somewhere else and put in the ground somewhere else.
Okay. And through you, Mr. Chair, just one last question. Is there any insurance in all of this that can protect the city of Hartford and its residents for the future, for now and for the future, after you have closed these plants?
Mira maintains insurance policies that would be associated with an ongoing business, but nothing beyond the insurance policy. We utilized the $25 million policy we utilized for the cleanup of the site to industrial and commercial standards subsequent to the CLP transaction.
And so the other question the residents would know is, can you share your copy of your policy with us? So at least if, somebody was on the property, anything happens, at least we should have a copy of that with the city of Hartford.
We could certainly share the insurance policy we have with the city. Yes.
Right. All right. I think that's all the questions I have on my text messages.
Thank you,
so very
Councilwoman.
much.
Thank you. And I see Gabrielle Frigon from Deep has her hand up. You wanted to chime in here?
Just very briefly, just to put a little bit of a finer point on the liabilities associated with properties. And that is for the solid waste facilities, meaning the transfer stations that Mira owns, they would still be required pursuant to the regulations to close those facilities in the same way that they would be required, that they are required to submit a closure plan and then conduct the closure for the waste to energy facility. So there is, there's a little bit of complicated mathematics in terms of determining value of an asset when you still have potential cleanup obligations associated with those properties. So I just wanted to put a little bit of a detail to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from any other council members? All right, thank you. I have one request that I think from all of council, and that is that we'd like Mira to come back to council on a regular basis. I think quarterly might be very reasonable for giving us an update as to where we are. It also appears to me that we at council and perhaps the administration have some work to do to investigate with Deep what the process is or how much time we have to get involved with this discussion of the post-closure use, which apparently is going to drive the budget. And I think that's probably one of our most important concerns at this point, is driving that budget to achieve the end that makes a little bit more sense for us here in the city of Hartford, if I'm hearing all my colleagues' comments. So I don't know if you want to say anything further, but I do think we'd like to call you back at least on a quarterly basis until Mira is no longer there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hang on, Councilman Sanchez. I'm letting Mr. Kirk.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just want to chime in prior to Mr. Kirk's comment, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Well, you're not coming in very clearly, but give it a go.
Hello?
Go ahead, try it, Councilman
Okay.
Sanchez.
It's my understanding, Mr. Kirk and Mr. Egan, that you. Okay, it's my understanding that Mr. Kirk and Mr. Egan will be leaving the leadership at Mira, and that concerns me as far as what the following leadership may be. To continue this conversation at cheer.
Got it. Let's throw that over to Mr. Kirk and Mr. Egan.
Sure. I think I can handle it. Yes. Thank you, Chairman and Councilman Sanchez. Both Pete and I are being laid off in January. The downsizing of the organization continues. I will be replaced as president by our present Chief Financial Officer, Mark Daly. Pete's responsibilities will be picked up by a number of folks remaining at Mira, prominently Dave Bodendorf, who's present with us today at the meeting, and Chris Shepard, environmental engineer. And I can assure you that the horsepower and expertise to manage the decommissioning of the site is not being compromised. The board has been very focused on ensuring the management, administrative, and technical expertise is present, available, and engaged to ensure the Mira's responsibilities are executed fully and thoroughly. I would also like to close with a comment, if I will. I truly understand the interests of the host city here at Hartford. Hartford has been a host to the many communities that participated in the Mira projects over the past 35 years. The contributions of Hartford as host city have been very substantial. We talked a little bit about the landfill, which was originally, since the 40s, a MSW landfill, was redeveloped by Mira, by CRA, into an ash residue landfill. It was operated by Mira for many years, closed by Mira, and we were very grateful and advantaged by the opportunity to be able to use both that site and the South Meadows site for many years. The regions in the regional towns, 70 originally, but upwards of 100 benefited greatly by Hartford's contribution to the region, practical contributions in kind in real estate and operations to the region. That's certainly not lost on us. We're very appreciative of it, and I know our towns are as well. And we do understand the desire by the city to find a higher and better use of this remarkable asset in South Meadows. I'm just concerned that the burden, the heavy lift involved in taking this very challenging site and developing it into a higher and better use will be extraordinarily difficult. We're very Mira is very sympathetic to the desires, and we'll work diligently with the city, DEP, and the legislature to try and find the best future for the site. But it will be extraordinarily challenging. I'm hoping today's presentation shed some light on that. It is a site that has been industrial use for well over 100 years. And sadly, back 100 years ago, we did not pay attention to many things that we've since learned are quite dangerous and quite expensive to undo. But that said, Mira and its volunteer board of directors are very focused on the best interests of the towns. That's written right into our mission statement. And we are committed, and I think I speak freely for the board in that we'll work tirelessly with the city, DEP, and the legislature to try and find the best outcome as the plant decommissions and a future use for the site is determined.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kirk and Mr. Egan. And,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Councilman Sanchez.
Yes, I just want to start off with thank you for coming tonight, this evening, for your presentation. I definitely have been challenged with the process here to champion for the city of Hartford and our residents for the responsibilities and accountability of what Mira has been basically doing here in Hartford. All right. As we all know, the city of Hartford, the capital of the state, has been burdened, and we shoulder the majority of the burden of the region. I would hope that everyone on this panel, and prior to this, we had many more on this panel, but everyone, including the representatives of DEEP, which I appreciate being here, understand the dynamics of what's going on here in the city. This city is majority minorities, and in the past, obviously, the education was not there for everyone in the city to understand the negative effects of having a plant like this basically in the middle of our community. So I am hoping that not only Mira, but DEEP understands what we are looking for in advancing our city, the capital of the state, to a better future. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you for cooperating with us at this time. And I definitely will and do demand that the city of Hartford, the mayor, and our council are at the table of this conversation for the future of the city. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Councilman Sanchez. I'm remiss in that I did have one other member of the public that had sent in written comments, and that was Corey Mackey Nicewander, representing the Greater Hartford Interfaith Action Alliance, as well as the Center for Leadership and Justice, who apologized for not being able to make it here tonight herself. She's apparently conducting a very large gathering elsewhere tonight. Questions that she asked have been asked tonight, but she did want Mira to hear that she and her groups are very concerned about the decommissioning and very concerned about the environmental remediation needed at the site. So I just wanted to make mention of that before we close this conversation. As Councilman Sanchez already thanked thank both the representatives from Mira as well as the representatives from Deep for being here this evening. Extend my thanks as well. Hearing no other comments from any other council members, do we have any? I'm prepared to close this matter and move on to our next agenda item. Okay.
Thank you all.
Have a great evening.
Take care.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, moving right along, we have the last item on our agenda. Art Feldman, Hartford, One World Market Food Truck Project in the South End at 681 Weathersfield Avenue. And I know Mr. Feldman's been patiently on the screen. I don't know who else is with him, but I'll leave it to him to introduce folks as he needs to. So Mr. Feldman, the floor is yours.
You guys are on mute.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Richie Feliciano. I'm the manager and co-founder of One World Market. One World Market is a project of International Hartford. It was created 7 years ago. And for the past 7 years, One World Market has been bringing people together with its international pop-up food court. When we started, One World Market was just tables and chairs, but since has grown to help people get into their own food trucks while also supporting food truck owners. One World Market will also be a place where immigrants from all over the world can start their own business and share their delicious cuisine with the community. We're located currently now at Hartford Hospital. We used to have just one day, and now we have 2 days. It's been going really well for the vendors. At this food truck project that we're doing at the Casona at the Weathersfield Avenue, it's unique. It's something that the people in my generation has been asking for, something diverse, something unique. And I'm glad to be here today with all, with you all. And okay, so this is my first time, so I'm sorry, that I'm a little nervous here.
It's all right.
Okay, but this food truck park is not just about the food. It's also about bringing people together and fostering a sense of community. We host regular events and entertainment such as music and dance performances and art exhibitions to make this a fun and engaging destination for all. We're proud to support immigrant entrepreneurs and provide them with a platform to succeed and thrive. And we're excited to offer the community a unique and exciting place together so that they can eat and enjoy this project. I know that Weathersfield Avenue has a negative reputation, and R&I and the organization, we have an active plan in place to help revitalize the neighborhood so that people can feel safe when they're visiting One World Market. So I'm lost for words here. I urge, the community and everyone to help support to make this a permanent fixture in our community so that together we could create a vibrant and welcoming destination that brings people together and also support local businesses. I think it's really important that we have something like that in the city of Hartford that brings different cultures, artists, entertainers, the community, the neighborhood, so that they can enjoy the beauty of what our city has to offer. It's real diverse. I heard Council Sanchez say earlier, it is a minority city. And I'm part of the city. I've been working on this project for 7 years now, and it has been evolving, it has been growing. And I've walked throughout Weathersfield Avenue, Standish Street, Brown Street, Preston. And I asked the people, I walk around, I show them flyers and pictures, and they all love it.
Mr. Feliciano, I don't want to interrupt you, sir, but you're talking about something that I don't think we know anything about. So it might be very helpful if you or somebody wanted to actually describe very specifically what it is you're talking about, what you plan to do, what this operation is going to consist of, hours of operation, all of that.
Parking, all the things that we will be asking questions about.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're talking about the existing Walmart market.
Yeah, no, I was just talking about existing Walmart market. Well, basically, Walmart market would be a food truck park. We have diverse cultures from all around the world: India, Jamaica, Africa.
I think it would be helpful to tell us, when you say a food truck park, talk about the piece of land that you're describing, the number of food trucks that you're anticipating. If you have site plan work that shows a layout, that would be helpful.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
If you have a specific design for hours of operation, for months of operation, that would be helpful. If you know whether you anticipate having liquor sales or not, that would be helpful. And I'm sure other council members will have questions, but I think you need to put a little meat on the bones here for us.
Okay, so let me get to share the screen so I could have all the schematics. We currently right now have 14 food trucks.
Is that your proposal? 14
we currently have 14 food trucks in rotation. So we're limited to how many food trucks we can have on our current site, and we rotate. So with this project, we wouldn't have 14 food trucks on site. We would have 4 food trucks on site. And then every day we would rotate to allow the public to experience the diverse cultures and the diverse foods that we offer. So here, let me share the screen. Okay, how does this work?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is on Wethersfield Avenue?
He hasn't identified a location, but I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be the corner of Wethersfield Avenue, where Casona is, and Standish Street.
He stated Casona earlier.
Okay, good.
It's gonna be Casona. All right, so here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass it along to Art Feltman. And I'm gonna help him with the presentation, and then he'll be answering further questions.
And then we're going to hear from a food truck and from our board chair, food truck operator. What Mr. Feliciano was describing is the current One World Market, not the proposed One World Market. The current One World Market, it started out in Parkville at the fast track station. He described it as tables and chairs, and it was also expanded to downtown to the old State House. If memory serves, I think Councilwoman Surgeon came to One World Market.
Yes, we did.
We walked down from City Hall together.
Yep.
And I think some of the other council people have probably visited it.
Yep.
Councilman LeBron has been to some of our events. So we were at the old State House while the city was very much, while the downtown was populated with office workers, and we were able to sell the ethnic foods to the office workers. And then for the last 4 years, we've been at Hartford Hospital. As Mr. Feliciano indicated, we're there 2 lunches a week, Thursdays and Fridays. And we're also, since the autumn, we've been there 7 nights a week for the 2nd and 3rd shifts as well. So that's the current history from 2016 to the present. And Mr. Feliciano described to you how it's been operating and what the successes have been. And he's been managing the market, and he was the co-founder from the beginning of the 2016. This is a PowerPoint describing the permanent year-round One World Market that's being proposed. It would be at the site of Casona at 681 Wethersfield Avenue. And God bless you, whoever is sneezing. And it's designed.
Yeah, can we ask Henry's iPhone, whoever Henry is, can you put yourself on mute, please? Thank you.
Okay. So it's going to be a food court in the part of the present restaurant parking lot, just taking up 4 spaces that would be operating for lunches and dinners 6 days a week, as Mr. Feliciano indicated, on a rotating basis. There will also be, as you can see the picture here towards the right, a breakfast cafe, which will be open 5 or 6 days a week in the morning. This is something that's been especially requested by the Barry Square Maple Avenue Revitalization Zone. That'd be something that would be accessible cost-wise for the neighborhood to eat at, and also to be able to sit and enjoy free Wi-Fi and not be rushed from their table, to just be a gathering place. It would also be the dining area during the lunch and dinner time for people who are coming to the food trucks during cooler weather, or who just want to sit inside rather than outside at one of the picnic tables or in one of the outside settings. So this is some renderings of what the outside portion of the food truck court will look like. And then the next slide is this is the current One World Market. You can see one of the vendors on the left, and on the right, we have one on the left is one of our Jamaican from Munchers, and the one on the right is from one of the Middle Eastern vendors, and he's with the president of Hartford Hospital, Bimal Patel, who likes to come and have Middle Eastern food. And this is the idea for the inside, that we would renovate the existing building for dining, as well as the outside picnic tables, covered picnic tables. This is designed to be an all ages facility. We're going to have a community room. That'll be the next slide. That is open to the public, at very nominal cost, to provide for a variety of recreations and entertainments that the neighborhood and the wider public could enjoy. It's going to be a multi-generational facility. We're going to have children's attractions, including some video games and other activities and enticements for the children. Children's menus at the food trucks. And then we've also had a history, as some of you know. I know Councilman LeBron has been to them. We also hold concerts as a way of attracting patrons, and we have had the history of doing that for the last 7 years. This is a picture of the site that we've chosen for the facility. This is this is a rendering of what the coffee bar, the breakfast place would look like. And this is, what's the next one? We're going to have a co-working kitchen for both the food trucks on site, as well as any citywide, as well as any neighborhood resident or city resident who wants to start a catering business and can't afford necessarily to rent out a whole kitchen. We're going to have a place for 6 at a time. We will have separate appliances, and they will have their own storage, cold storage, dry storage, heated storage, frozen storage, and other facilities. There's a present facility at Hands on Hartford on New Bartholomew Avenue, but they are overcommitted, and we're going to be offering other opportunities for people. Food service is one of the most popular ways for people of color to start businesses and to get into something on the ground floor, and we're going to make it much easier for them to do that. We're also going to have an office of International Hartford to provide business counseling, both for the food businesses as well as for other businesses in the neighborhood, which includes access to capital. The benefits of this project of Metro Hartford are it's an economic driver. We're going to create a destination where money will come in and it will flow into the pockets of minority business owners, as well as their employees. We're going to have 100 permanent jobs. We're going to incubate about 40 businesses. We're going to take a part of the city that is blighted and depressing and has had some bad history, as Mr. Feliciano alluded to, and clean it up and have a multiplier effect, we hope, on other businesses that will thrive because new patrons are coming into the area from throughout the region. It's going to be a multi-generational gathering place. One of the things that we heard, and we had numerous neighborhood meetings, is that people, particularly longtime residents, feel that there's nothing, and our board chair will speak to this, but that there's no place for particularly the seniors in the neighborhood to bring their adult children and their grandchildren to, in order to have some kind of family time together close by to where the neighborhood residents, where the seniors live. And they look forward to bringing their children and their grandchildren who may be living outside the city into the city for an enjoyable experience for the whole family. And this will be a social enterprise, which means it's a business that's run for the purpose of generating public benefits, of creating philanthropic effects in terms of our interest in social mobility, our interest in raising incomes for minority business enterprises, our interest in employment for underemployed or unemployed city residents. And this project has, the development statuses. We have an option on the property. We have our architectural plans, which we were going to go through briefly. We are investigating the environmental status of the property. We've received, with support from the city, a $1.1 million state grant for this development. We are asking and have put in an application for a small business investment grant from the new program, the $1 million pot the city has put out there. We've also received a Hartford Foundation grant, and we're seeking some loan capital as well to match the grants. Our project has been endorsed by Senator Fonfara, Senator Slapp, House Speaker Tom Ritter, Majority Leader Jason Rojas, State Treasurer Sean Wooden, State Representatives Ed Vargas and Julio Concepcion, the Mayor of Hartford, as I mentioned, the Marge NRZ and the South NRZ, the 6th District Democratic Town Committee, Hartford City Council President Molly Rosado, Hartford City Councilman James Sanchez, Hartford City Councilman Nick LeBron, Hartford City Councilman John Gale, Spanish American Merchants Association, HEDCO, Community Economic Development Fund, Hispanic Federation, the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, and the State of Connecticut Community Investment Fund. Here's the schematic of the outside of the facility. Where you see along the top is running from right to left is Weathersfield Avenue. What you can see, the building that's there is the present Casona restaurant. You can see to the right of the building that about a third of the parking lot would be used for 4 food truck stations plus picnic tables, with some new trees planted and some new dividers from some landscaping between there and the street. We would still have 10 parking spaces on that side. And then there's another 40 parking spaces, 40 to 50 parking spaces in another lot that's across the street. And then we've made arrangements with Metro Auto Body diagonally across the street that there could be overflow parking over there as needed. Then this is a picture of what the picnic area will look like with the food trucks present. We're putting a new entrance onto Casona as well. Then the next picture is of another one of the food court with behind you can see a patio and a deck. And then the next picture is and new landscaping. Everything will be kind of renovated. This is the existing kind of lounge area, the glassed-in area. It'll be transformed into a very sunny and light and plant-filled breakfast cafe. And it'll look something like this. And then the next slide is another view of the same thing. And then this is the community room that will be renovated and brightened up and will be used for all the purposes described earlier. And this is a schematic of what the improvements will look like on the most of this. These are the interior improvements that'll be done as part of the project. And I'd now like to call on Henry Ocasio, who is a food truck owner, has been with One World Market for many years, and he has a few things to say.
Good evening, everyone. I am a proud owner of El Bori food truck. I specialize in Puerto Rican food. When I met Richie and Art, they gave me an opportunity to participate in their program, and it helped me and it helped others because I gave employment to like 2 others individuals that work with me, and I just appreciate them very much. They don't help the community a lot. If I need something or if I need any type of help, I just call on them and they just stay there all the time for us. I can speak for all the food truckers that goes there every Tuesday and Wednesday, and then they made it happen for us to be able to work at the hospital at nighttime. It's helping us and it's helping the employees from Hartford Hospital because they don't have anywhere else to eat, especially at that time. And so it just helped us a lot. It helps the community a lot. On Weathersfield Avenue, I mean, the city of Hartford put an ordinance to stop the food trucks from working they only work till 9 o'clock at night now. So that stopped a lot of money for a lot of the food trucks that was out there at that time, because that's what basically people was getting out of work or going to the trucks to eat and stuff like that. So it hindered us a lot. But by me working with Richie and Art, it helped me a lot. It helped me a lot, and I appreciate them. And I just hope that we'll be able to move forward with the project at Casona on Weathersfield Avenue, because like you said, it's going to employ over 140 people, and it's going to be very good for the community and the kids and the adults, the elderly. I just think it's a great project. Me myself, I don't only do Hartford Hospital. I do Woodstock. My main goal right now for next year is to try to get into the biggie. I went to Delaware State for 10 days. I went to New Jersey State for 10 days. So I'm all over the place with my truck, and I'm trying to open up new floodgates for minorities to get into these big festivals, and because every time you go to these carnivals, they don't have our ethnic foods there. You know what I'm saying? We just eating fried dough and everything is fried basically, junk food. So, I'm trying to get into these venues where we can bring ethnic food there, where people really can enjoy it. And at the same time, everybody makes money, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. But that's all I have to say. I'm just happy that I met those 2 individuals. They given us all opportunities. They're very on point with communications with the other food trucks. And if something's going on or somebody's not getting along, we get down to resolutions. We have meetings once a month, and we talk about what can we do to make our situation better. How can our sales go up? They also help us with marketing. They help us out with signs. They help us with anything that we need to increase our sales or to help our food truck function. All we have to do is ask them. And that's what they're there for, to help us. And I really appreciate that. Without them, I would have been stuck, because not a lot of us, even though we have our own businesses, a lot of us don't know where to go for the resources, because the city of Hartford is not really into food trucks. They're more into like the restaurants. And so like right now, a lot of the food trucks are trying to get grants and stuff like that. And Art is helping us with that. So they're giving some of the guys grants to buy equipment for their truck, tires, or whatever the guys need. The program is helping everyone with that, because they have a RRZ revitalization for the mortar and brick restaurants. They're the only ones that are getting grants now. We don't get no grants, and we doing the same thing they doing, but we just moving around in different areas of Hartford. So I just hope this program could be accepted, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you for your comments, Henry. I have 3 council members with their hands up. So Art Feldman, I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to take my council members, and hopefully you'll be able to fill in the gaps with whatever other information that you wanted to impart. So Councilman Sanchez, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Richie and Art. Hope you're having a good evening. Thank you for staying on this long. So my question here is, first of all, it's a comment. All right, I've been at World War Market, basically up in Park Street and Bartholomew, I believe is the street on the side, and I believe it's a very successful organization. And I appreciate what you've been doing, Art, for the community, entrepreneurs, and I believe in what you're doing. Okay, now Richie, I'm a huge supporter when it comes to supporting minority entrepreneurs and making sure they're successful, right? So my question here is that I am supporting. Okay, I am supporting the idea. Okay, have you and Art done a community outreach? Okay, and the reason why I'm asking that, if you've done a community outreach to what the neighborhood would like to see, is because of the disaster that happened on Weathersfield Avenue, Maple Avenue, and Franklin Avenue. Now, I'm not doing this to shut you down. I'm here to support you, but I need to know that the community is also supporting you as well. I'm not sure if you're aware, the last 3 years, it was a huge problem. And as Henry mentioned, I think he mentioned something about, non-support or what have you, but, what we had happen on those avenues, those major corridors on the south end, really disrupted and was a disaster to the community. When you have folks that are trying to get to work and they can't leave their driveway, or trying to get home from work and can't get into the driveway. So, I'm not trying to say that this is a situation that's going to happen, because you're at the very far south end, right past Airport Gasona. Okay. So with that said, I'm curious, what does the neighborhood in that vicinity, say, or, do you guys reach out to at least a perimeter of at least 2 or 3 blocks to ask those folks, how do they feel about having the food truck court there? So that's my first question.
Okay, well, there's a number of questions there, Councilman Sanchez, and I'll try to unpack one at a time. The first answer is yes, the community was involved with this from the very beginning. Back in November of 2019, I believe it was, that we had public meetings at St. Augustine's Church. We had a meeting at Hyacinth Yenny's backyard. We've had meetings with the South End NRZ, And Richie has talked to people door to door in the neighborhood. And as a result of those meetings, first of all, people had input into what they wanted and what they didn't want. And we have incorporated their ideas into our proposal. As a result, we have endorsements from the South End NRZ, which governs that area, and from the Maple Avenue revitalization zone, which is the adjacent area. So I think people know that I've been very involved in the South End for decades and have really kept my ear to the ground. And believe me when I say that there is tremendous support for this idea. Now, in terms of what happened to around the food truck ordinance, when you say there was, first of all, it was a temporary situation that happened during the pandemic when the restaurants were closed and the nightclubs were closed, and people who were out at night and who were finished with their jobs and were looking for some form of socialization, did gravitate towards food trucks. The food trucks themselves were not selling alcohol. They were not encouraging or doing anything other than doing what they had always done before the pandemic and after the pandemic, which was to sell food. Now, there was the ordinances that were passed dealt with public property and public streets. And the councilman said there was a devastating effect. There was a devastating effect on the food truck owners, because what happened was that people who had been there for years and years, minding their own business and selling food to people since 1980, 1990, all of a sudden they couldn't sell food anymore. So what the ordinance provided, I don't think anyone wanted them to go out of business, but the ordinance provided was that on private property, food courts could be established that were regulated, and that where the flow of consumers would be observed and could be selected. And so these food truck courts started to pop up as intended, and as were in the cover letter of the resolution itself, of the ordinance itself. It says that there was an intention to develop private food courts on private property. And indeed, that did happen on Farmington Avenue this past summer, and I think it was very successful. It happened in West Hartford at Gastro Park on New Park Avenue, and that's been successful. And we're proposing a third one, which would be on Weathersfield Avenue on private property, where no one will be able to gain admittance to the food trucks unless they conform with the rules that we have in place, and they're enforced by the security officers that we always have on hand at the existing One World Market.
Now, can I interject?
Yeah, please do.
Also, Councilman Sanchez, we also had a meeting with the community officer and the owners of the neighboring gas station. And I also spoke to Mr. Feltman and had the idea to put in the budget that we have our own security vehicle. That way they can monitor the parking, they can monitor the traffic. And if they ever see anything arising, our security at One World Market will be in contact with the community officer and be able to call the officer. So that way we could avoid what happened when the pandemic was going on with all this hanging out, car racings and those type of things.
I appreciate that.
I can't hear you, Sanchez. Sorry.
My second question.
I can't hear you. I'm so sorry.
Now,
can you repeat that?
You hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello? Do you hear me now? Okay.
Absolutely.
So I just said that you answered my second question, Richie. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So for example, all right, I understand the concept. I support the concept. So, for example, what is the place
Councilman Sanchez, you're
if a
cutting out again.
situation occurs where the racing and the gathering? Hello.
Can you repeat the question, please? I can't hear
Yeah,
you.
do you hear me now? Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I said the second question, you answered it. Thank you for that.
We got that. Yep.
Okay, you got that. Okay. So my next question is there any, in case a situation occurs where that gathering that we don't need happens, is there a plan?
Absolutely. We're hiring a security company. And before we launch One World Market, we will go over everything with the security company. And I look forward, with the help of the city of Hartford, the police officers, to be there at the meeting with our security company to go over ideas, to go over protocols, to go over a system and recommendations of what we could do with our security and the market staff to avoid that, to divert that. So my thing is this, I emphasize security and safety. It's important for me. Not only that, I actually want to, do the best I can to bring something unique to this project. That way that the neighboring houses could come outside. Because when I went and did my research, a lot of the neighbors and people that live on Standard Street, they don't go to the gas station there on Brown Street. They don't feel comfortable going to that gas station with the panhandling and everything.
Right.
And I want to change that. And that's why I feel that with not only the owners of the gas station and the city of Hartford's police department and One World Market, I think together before we launch and we all could work in sync, that we would have a great grand opening and then invite all the neighboring houses. So that way they can feel comfortable to come outside and walk around the corner and enjoy not only the market, but also go to the gas station if they want to grab anything and get gas now. Because usually they go to Weathersfield to get gas, or they go down the airport road to get gas to avoid that situation there. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, yes, I have two more.
Councilman Sanchez, Councilman Sanchez, I'm going to put you on hold for a second, okay?
Yes.
We'll come back to you with your other questions. Let me let another voice in here. Councilman LeBron.
Yes. So thank you, Richie, and thank you, Art. And I just want to commend you because you guys had the unenviable task of being last on the agenda after a very long presentation. So, and you guys still here, right? And you're still here and you're still swinging. And so, it's hard. I know that because, all of us are tired, right? We are all working and stuff like that. So, I also want to comment, Richie, thank you for the opportunity of presenting. I think that you're representative of what we like to see in Hartford, someone who has gone through programming that was funded through Hartford programs. Art, thank you for developing a young man to become a small business entrepreneur with dreams of becoming, whatever it is that you want to be. Someone who that even within this presentation has grown. We all understood your shoes. No one presents to council at the beginning. And I understand the need to be nervous. I still get nervous now. I'm nervous right now talking to you. But nonetheless, I think you did a great job. And you can see the amount of investment that you have, because as you answering the questions, you can see and build how much thought process you have. And what I will tell you is to continue to present, to continue to be in the front of these projects, because your face is the face that we all would like to see. It's a familiar face that we all want to see for future generations. But I actually do not have a question. Councilman Gale We also have a board chair who was waiting just equally as long. I believe it's, is it Shelby Young?
Right.
Yes, Shelby Young from Bloomfield has been waiting, had wanted the opportunity to speak. So I'll yield the floor to you, Ms. Young, as the board chair.
Thank you so much. I just want to say, and I know you guys are tired, so I'm going to make this short. Think about, think about a husband and a wife. Their children have, one of their childs have a special event coming up. Let's say they're graduating from whatever event. And the parents, they grew up on the South End, but, as parents do, you grow your kids and they move to the suburbs. Well, their child, their 21-year-old has grown up and they want to put on the event. And they call their parents who are 80 and they live on the South End. Okay. And so they're like, hey, moms, I'm going to come and pick you up, you and pops. And the mother says, hey, what people don't know is elderly people don't like to really go far. They really don't like to travel far. And now that we've created the one world market, they can actually say, well, why don't we have it down here on our end? We have this beautiful venue now where all the multi-generational groups can come. Not only can me and Pop feel comfortable going down the street, but you guys can come home back to your neighborhood. And then you can bring your adult children as 21, 25, so that they don't always have to be afraid of their neighborhood. And you bring them down to One World Market and that you see these food trucks with all these different cultures. And one of the things that I think that needs to be said, a lot of cultures, immigrants, they're collective in nature. They're not individualized. They don't think about just me. They think about their families. And so when you have something like One World Market, that whole name, that means inclusiveness. We need that back in the neighborhood. That's what's missing. Everybody's getting so individualized. We need to bring it back. I'm West Indies. Trust me, I know what that means. So we're on the South End. We're having this event. We're going to pick up our father and mother, bring them down to One World Market. We have some great grands coming down there. They're sitting down at the tables. There's different venues, different trucks, serving all different cultural foods. You have a Cuban food truck, Portuguese food truck, West Indian food truck, whatever food truck. And one of the kids goes to the West Indian food truck and the father orders them a patty and they bring back the food to the table. And the child says, Daddy, what is this? And he says, it's a patty. Now they're Cuban and they have no idea. The child has no idea. What do you mean, patty? What is that? Right then and there, that child is learning about another culture. It opens up doors. It just opens up so much communication. And that's the problem with a lot of us. We're not really paying attention, not just from the economic standpoint that One World Market is going to bring, but we have to get back to understanding immigrants that are coming into this country now, they're collective in nature. They're family oriented. They like to go somewhere where there's multi-family generations there. And this One World Market is going to allow many cultures that are similar in nature and background, because we're collective in nature, to actually be able to bond with each other, learn more about each other. And that's going to give each family, each multi-family a chance to sit down. The father's explaining about a patty. Next thing you know, the grandmother or great-grandmother can start talking about their heritage and their history. So I really think that this is more than just a venue for us to just come and just sit down and eat. It's going to bring so many opportunities to bring about history telling, independence, about your independent culture you come you come from. I mean, I'm really excited. And one of the things I've told Art and Richie, once we get this up and running, I would like to see this over in the North End, because I know this is what our people is waiting for. West Indian, African American, Africans, you name it. This would be so nice on the North End. So I hope you guys really think about it. It's not just about individualization. It's really about collective cultures coming together and finally having economic growth. Thank you guys for being so patient. I know you're tired, because so am I. And I hope you guys have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Councilwoman Rossetti.
Holy moly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Ms. Young, you've probably, to me, made the most sense of anybody this evening. And I say that because you gave me a moment to reflect. I also will bring up some of my genuine concerns, but you did give me a moment to reflect. You know, as the daughter of an immigrant, granted Italian, you know, lifelong Hartford resident, my family was, you know, centered around food and the family and the table and how that works. But I'm going to wear my other, you know, kind of, oh God, crappy, sensible hat that
It's
nobody
okay.
can hear,
I understand.
you know, and that doesn't mean, again, that it's not something that I would like to envision happen, but let's think about some of these things for a minute.
Okay.
I have a genuine concern about the parking. I know Mr. Feltman mentioned spots across the street, but I have a genuine concern. We have ongoing issues with street parking, resident parking, just parking in general. I work over towards there, just the driving. So I do have a genuine concern about the issues of parking. I have a genuine concern about a building being taken off the tax rolls. I assume if it's a nonprofit, you can answer afterwards, Art, it will be taken off the tax rolls. I have a genuine concern about hours of operation. I know Henry mentioned, you know, when the ordinance was passed, we had to stop our hours. I hope this isn't seen as a avenue, as a free-for-all back to late hours again. You can say some of it was around the pandemic, but also there's a lot of people, and I know you've talked to a lot of people, but I've gotten a lot of calls about a worrisome about quality of life again, noise, and the things that come with late nights. Funding, you know, I run a nonprofit. This is an ambitious venture. Maybe it's an adventure and a venture, but it's both. It's ambitious. And, you know, I have a concern about how it's going to be funded. What is the timeline? How will it be implemented? And I think we need to think about, just as other towns, and again, you don't want to say we're like any other town, we're the capital city, but a lot of rules are put in place for reasons that we, you know, need to think about. And I think we need to, if anything, we learned some things from the pandemic. You know, maybe some things were exaggerated during that time, but I have had multiple calls from people that have some of the genuine concerns that I've talked about. I'm not going to belabor, because we are, you know, late at night, but I think these are some of the things that we seriously need to think about and talk about going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, can I respond?
Briefly.
Okay, well, for terms of the parking, this isn't a commercial zone, so we would expect that there would be traffic, and we want to have traffic because that means that people are coming into the city to buy from our businesses there. You know, that's part of being in a commercial area. We do have more parking at this site. In fact, the reason that we identify the site is because of its plentiful parking compared to other parcels that we looked at. It has much more parking than the Farmington Avenue food court, which has 0 parking. It has twice as much parking as Gastro Park in West Hartford, which has 20 spaces. It has much more off-street parking than either of those locations. So the parking situation is actually very, very good, in my opinion. Secondly, with regard to the issue about whether this is a nonprofit or a for-profit, it's a public benefit corporation. Public Benefit Corporation is a corporation for tax purposes that is a tax-paying entity, but it serves public purposes. Newman's Own Dressing, an example of a public benefit corporation. So that is how it will be organized.
Mr. Chair, through you.
No, wait,
no, is the answer you will be paying taxes?
Yeah, is the answer you will be paying taxes?
We're going to be seeking a 2-year tax abatement and then paying full taxes after that.
Got it.
So, but it's a tax. It's not a nonprofit, non-taxable. You will put aside that you may get a tax abatement. It will be a taxable property.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then in terms of the hours of operation and so forth, that will be in compliance with the existing ordinance, which provides that in certain areas it's 9 p.m. In other areas it could be 12 p.m. Whatever we do will be in compliance with the ordinance.
You know the ordinance, I'm assuming, is it 9 or 12?
It's in the city can designate at least 2 zones where it can be up to 12 o'clock, and we will seek to be one of those zones.
Through you, Mr. Chair, those zones were specifically made for areas that did not have residential, and I would be very concerned about you thinking that that would happen. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Those are my only I think I've answered.
Okay, then let me move on to Councilwoman Surgeon, and then we'll come back to Councilman Sanchez. Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically this presentation is just an information sharing to let us know what you guys are planning.
We're also seeking your support, and the form of support, there is an application into the Economic Development Department for the small business grants. This is a small business, and we are seeking your support for award of that grant.
And how much of the grant are we applying for?
100,000.
Is that the one up to 100,000 for? I'm trying to remember what the for small businesses, right? For creating jobs. I'm trying to remember what that grant calls. What are the requirements for that small grant?
You're remembering it right.
Okay, thank you. Phew, getting kind of old. I do have sort of the same concerns, some of the concerns Councilman Rossetti have, and that would be is a residential neighborhood. I have also received one complaint that says, apparently, as Councilman Sanchez talked about over the years, there was a lot of residential concerns in the South Hartford regarding the food trucks, the noise level, the garbage that's left over. And I think that's a sort of complaint I'm hearing, that this is so close to the residential neighborhood that they're afraid that this is going to happen all over again.
Well, what the noise? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, there was one letter writer. There was one letter writer, and who had all these complaints. I attempted to reach out to the letter writer to ask her if she'd ever visited One World Market. She's had the opportunity since 2016. We've been going 6 months a year, at least twice a week, in 4 locations around the city. And I asked her if she had taken the advantage of the opportunity to visit One World Market and to see what the impact is now on quality of life, and see how well it's run and so forth. And the letter writer had never taken the time before writing the letter to do any research on One World Market and to see how we run our shop.
Well, away from that, I do know of the major issues. That's why the ordinance that came up on the books was because of so many issues and concerns in South Hartford. I do have to compliment you guys in that sense that my sister is a nurse. and she does look forward. She's a nurse at Hartford Hospital.
Great.
And being of West Indian descent, she does look forward to coming out and getting some Jamaican food, at the 11 to because she worked the 11 to 7 shift. So I want to thank you guys for that. So I'm gonna have to, say that good thing there. It does work. A lot of people at Hartford Hospital love the cultural difference in food. That's away from what the hospital serves. And so when you work late night, you come out and you want something good to eat. So so she has mentioned, I didn't know it was you guys. I did not know it was one. All she tells me is that, there's this food truck, Jamaican, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's nice. It's 11 o'clock in the night. So I didn't know it was you guys. So congratulations. I have heard of you guys. And I enjoyed coming down to, downtown, to see it because I think it was fun. It's fun in the summertime. Again, the only reservations I have is the parking and, how do you maintain, the noise level? How do you maintain, the congregation of people?
Well, the noise level, the trucks won't have their generators active. We'll have a electrical plug where they could plug their trucks. So that way there's no noise ordinance in the community. So it doesn't affect the residents.
Okay, well, that answers that. And do you guys, I'm sure, congratulations on receiving the $1.5 million in the CIF fund. So do you guys have a budget for the overall, what you guys are trying to accomplish?
Yes.
For different phases, I presume?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a $2.8 million budget. It involves completely resurfacing the 2 parking lots, which are not in good condition, and a complete renovation of the building.
And is that the 2.8 including purchasing of the building?
And the purchase of the building.
Okay. And so basically, pursuant to your answer to Councilman Rossetti, you're going to ask for some tax abatement, for a couple of years thereafter, it's whatever the taxes accumulate for the building. How are the food trucks taxed? I don't know how that works. Is it just personal tax? How does that work?
Yeah, well, they're considered, it's a motor vehicle. So they pay motor vehicle taxes to the city of Hartford. And any personal property that they have is taxed as personal property. And obviously they pay income tax and they pay taxes on their employees.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I anticipate, if I can just say one other thing, I anticipate this will actually be a net increase in taxes because we are improving the building and the assessment will be higher when we're done than when we start.
Thank you.
I think somebody is listening, Mr. Chair. And again, could you definitely stress that you're going to ask for a tax abatement, but everything is the property is going to pay taxes? Because somebody just texted me to say that then you guys are not going to pay taxes.
No, we
I don't think people are hearing you properly.
We said yes.
So you are going to be paying taxes after the tax abatement time is up?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilman Sanchez, I know I cut you short at one point. Did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So, first of all, I just want to echo the sentiment from Councilwoman Surgeon and Councilwoman Rossetti. But I definitely want to say that Ms. Young touched a chord in me. And I appreciate your comments. And I do believe in what you said. All right. Actually, I mean, it really does affect the community in the way that you stated. Right. So, I want everyone to know here that I am a very huge supporter of small businesses, including food trucks. All right. So I'm going to ask a simple question, and I'm going to ask several more after that. So, Art, One World Market is a nonprofit or profit?
It's a public benefit corporation, which is a form of for-profit.
So is it a nonprofit or for profit? Yes or no?
It's a for-profit under you register the way you would register any other corporation. It is a taxable entity, but it has to serve public, in order to be a public benefit corporation, it has to serve a public purpose.
Right. So when it serves a public purpose, it becomes a nonprofit, correct?
No, it does not.
Okay, so the purchase of the Casona property, will that be under nonprofit status or a for-profit where they do pay the tax?
For-profit. They pay
Okay.
the tax.
Okay, now I will move on to my next question or comment first. I appreciate you, reaching out to the CSO. And my question there is that when you reached out to the CSO, did you reach out to the entire Hartford Police Department for their input?
We reached out at the suggestion of the NRZs. We met with the 2 community service officers who are responsible for that area. Can I finish, Councilman? As well as with the commercial neighbors of the property.
Okay, Art, so that's the CSO. Right. I'm speaking about the chief, assistant chief, the leadership of HPD.
I don't know the current chief of police.
Well, it's Thody. And my question is, did you reach out to HPD, not only the CSO?
We reached out to HPD in the way I said.
Okay. So my next question is, did you get the endorsement from Carl Williams, who's the chair of the South End NRZ?
Yes, and he's listening right now.
Okay, I don't see him on the screen here.
He's on his phone. He's on his phone.
Okay, so normally I would see his phone number too as well, but it's not there. That what I see, maybe you're seeing, you have a better screen than I do. So my next question here is that now I understand you mentioned that you had the endorsement from the Marge, but that's not the district to the Marge. So you had mentioned, you know, a list of names of endorsement. Can you email the council the letters of the endorsement that you received?
I didn't seek letters, sir. I talked to people or met with them, and they individually authorized me to use their names or the names of their organizations.
So do you have copies of emails to that effect?
No, not necessarily.
So I think it's important that we receive all the letters to the conversation, if you can reach back out to them, because you mentioned my name as well. I did. Support.
I did, because you said at a meeting at the restaurant, La Sana restaurant, that you supported the project. So I reported you. I
support the project, Art, right, as long as the community supports the project.
Well, that isn't what you said at the time.
Well, maybe you can correct me here, but I would like to receive copies of letters of endorsements from the list that you provided to us. And the reason being is this, and I don't want to be the negative person here, but as I mentioned earlier, okay, and I'm not putting the blame on the food trucks, not at all. But it's unfortunate that in this area of the city of Hartford, we have a problem. And the culture is extremely different from Farmington Avenue that you mentioned and the other location that you mentioned. But the situation in our end of the city is very different. And we need to ensure that the residents that lives there are protected versus which are the many versus the few.
I
And
couldn't agree with you more, and that's why we're doing this project to improve the neighborhood, Councilman.
I understand it's to improve the neighborhood, but I have to keep my responsibility is the majority. So if you can provide me with letters of endorsement, I would definitely support this project.
I'll support you with I'll provide you with the letters we have, sir.
Okay, and then also I would like to just give some understanding too about the community there, because it's just like the North End. The reason why a lot of times you have this kind of quote unquote disturbances, you know, is because there's nothing positive, family oriented. A lot of times, again, and I keep stressing this, a lot of the young people, the immigrants, they're family oriented, and there's nothing for the kids or the young adults to do. This project that we're doing is bringing like church and club together in the neighborhood, where you don't have to go to church all the time and praise God. You don't have to go to the club all night to get your groove on. This is finally bringing something together that meets you in the multi-generations in the middle. It's different. It's like this is similar to if you're in Jamaica, where the families, they celebrate all in one. It's different than in this country. And this goes for the different Indians, Cubans. It's a different culture. So if I really believe if we understand bringing something positive and different to the mindset, the experience, you're going to get a different outcome, but you got to try something different. So that's just from me being West Indies and just being in the culture and understanding the kids and growing up in that environment, and everything's being taken away from you as far as there's not many boy and girls clubs, and if it is, it's for kids. There's nothing there where you see the grandparents, the parents, the young adults, and the great grands. There's nothing like that, and this is what we're trying to do. So I just wanted to.
So
Thank you, Ms. Young. Councilman Sanchez, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ms. Young, I appreciate that. Okay, and I understand what you're saying. Okay, but I don't know if you understand what happened in the South End for the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And to Henry, Henry's iPhone is how I can identify him. I am the proponent of making those changes for the food trucks because of the negative effects. So I am not here to say that I'm against this. I am here to say that we need to make sure we cross every avenue that is required to make sure that this project is successful. And that includes the community that lives there. And that community that lives there, the majority had emailed me, text me, and called me. I don't know how they got my personal number, but they call me. And they're very afraid of what this may bring. Now, is there Art and Richie? Is there a plan? And let me ask you this. Is there a plan if it becomes a situation like what happened on Weathersfield Avenue? Are you willing to shut down? Is there a plan? I'm not saying you.
I'm not sure I understand the question. So if Weathersfield Avenue, if the food trucks on Weathersfield Avenue are no longer there, the food trucks, I don't understand the hypothetical question.
Okay, so let me back up a little bit. I used to go to
Mr. Sanchez,
Persona all the time.
You go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Sanchez, if there's a plan, there's not a plan to shut down. There's a plan to succeed and move forward, in my eyes.
Okay.
There's a plan that at a certain hour, we do limit access to the public to gather at the food trucks so that we could eliminate the hanging out. So, for example, after I haven't discussed these hours, as I told you earlier, I want to, before I make the decision with R and the organization, I want to sit down with the security company because that's their job. They're experienced, they're professionals. And I also would like
Hello?
What happened?
I think they just froze.
If I
Yes, they
bet
did.
dollars to donuts, their phone died or their computer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they just froze.
I bet you they didn't anticipate being on for 4 hours.
Yeah. Well, maybe, Mr. Chair, we can.
I mean, what were we going to do with this
individually?
I'm sorry.
It's an informational meeting, and
right.
I think we've gotten quite a bit of information.
Right.
Ms. Young, you're still on, so I want to just give you 2 questions. I don't need the answers right now, but I do think that they should come back at some point. I asked a question early on whether you're going to have a liquor permit. I think that should be answered very specifically. I also have heard Mr. Feltman indicate that he's looking for a grant through our Development Services Department. I know some of these grants are matching grants, so I'd like to know if this is one of the matching grants where you're looking, you're going to put up an equal amount of money for the amount of money that's being sought in the grant. And the last thing I would say is, with all due respect, would you please ask Mr. Feltman to remove my name from his last the last page of his PowerPoint where he listed all these people that are supporting this. I absolutely support the concept, but that does not mean I support every single part of this presentation. And I don't think it's appropriate to be going around to other city departments and city indicating that a council person supports this before the actual proposal has come before us. So with all due respect, I'd ask you to ask Mr. Feltman to take my name off of that. And I don't know if other council members feel the same way.
Yeah, I think I've been getting phone calls from the community, and I think that either, so I mean, I think just being clear on what the endorsement mean, the way from a council perspective, right? When you give your name on something, it is of public record, and we have to be absolutely sure. Having conversations, and let's say I'm gonna give you, Ms. Young, just to be really lighthearted about this, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say, for example, right, I supported a plan that had Pac-Man, the game, in it, right? And they decided not to put Pac-Man in the game. That may or may not, change my endorsement for it, even though that's something that's minute, right? And so, just going over things, and we got them back. Mr. Feltman, you guys, your computer died, right?
Right. It was Mira that did it.
Yes, okay. Yes. It was Mira. Let's blame Mira.
Hour and 20 minutes.
Yes. So what I would say is, and wrapping up for Councilman Gale has some open-ended questions. One around liquor permitting, one around I forgot what the other one is.
Matching grant.
Yeah, the matching grant. We're talking about the endorsement, Art. So in particular, you can circle back with me about my name and my endorsement and what that means. Please do tomorrow. And so, but what we were saying is that allowing the people who have endorsed at various periods of time throughout the process is very different from having, the plan in place. And I was given a bad 9:15 example at night of, you may have presented, me the plan with Pac-Man, the video game involved, and now you don't have Pac-Man, and that's enough to change my endorsement, right? So nonetheless, I think just solidifying what that endorsement means, I agree with Councilman Sanchez. It only strengthens to have letters of support. There's nothing wrong with having that and having that documentation. And then also just either having it by email or letters. And then, going back to those folks, like, what does your endorsement mean? And so, having those letters would, I think, be very helpful. So this wasn't something that we were going to vote on. I'm not the chair, Councilman Gale, but I'm a tired voting member. So I'm hoping that, unless there's anything else, Mr. Chair, I'll leave it up to you.
Thank you, Councilman. I just want to ask if there's any final comment from either Councilman Sanchez or Councilwoman Surgeon. Not looking for one, but if there is one.
I'm good, thank you.
So I'm on, and I see that Richie and Art Feldman is on.
Yes.
I think, and thank you, Councilman LeBron. Art, I believe that it's extremely necessary that we receive the copies of all the names listed that you share with us with their endorsement for this project. And Richie, please take my number, okay? If you have a pen on you, it is 860-4. Oh, you know what? Art has my number.
Okay.
Art, please share my number with Richie. I want to have a one-to-one conversation.
Absolutely, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate you. I appreciate all my colleagues for supporting and being on this meeting and enduring the time because we had some serious items to talk about.
Absolutely.
We're all in this together, Councilman Sanchez. It's all for one and one for all. So
I'd like to put a motion on the floor.
I second the motion. I second the motion.
There's a motion to adjourn on the floor and a second.
Absolutely.
All those in favor signify by saying good night.
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Happy holidays.
everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Nick. Sanchez. Thank you, Councilman Chair Gale. Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.